Armstrong's team over the last couple of years.
Well, I must say that breakaway going has hurt an awful lot of riders. Michael Rick is now reported behind the race, and Perez, I think they were the images we saw a few moments ago. They were struggling behind the pack. Stuart O'Grady, who was riding just behind the US Postal before this climb started, has slipped right to the tail of the race, obviously suffering after that long escape yesterday with Anthony Geslan. They were away for 200 kilometers, and now they're facing up to what is a very tough 2 days. 461 kilometers will be ridden by the riders between yesterday and by the end of today. And tomorrow, of course, we climb Alpe d'Huez. And what the feeling is of both Paul Sherwen and myself is that tomorrow is the day that Lance Armstrong will look to attack. That's what we think. The Côte du Mont des Princes is 6 kilometers long, and that's what the peloton are climbing at the moment. A steady gradient of around 7% will keep them in and out of the saddle, but they are climbing it at a very steady pace. They are losing ground to the breakaway as we speak. It's now slipped away to 7 3/4 minutes.
Man having a hard time is the man caught in the middle in no man's land right now. From the Cofidis team, Médéric Klein is about 2 minutes behind the leading group of 4 riders, but he's 5 minutes in front of the main field. A bit of an acceleration coming here as we get closer to the summit. These two men are in fact fighting out the lesser points out on the course. This will be Walter Benetton in the red and white jersey here of Brioche La Boulangère, but in fact these are such minimal points that it's not really going to have any effect on the top of the overall classification. I have a funny feeling we may well see our good friend Richard Virenque leading that tonight.
I'm sure you're right. Fred Fino there, who we've seen last few days, was the king of the mountains, just winning the sprint for the lesser points. A little bit of a chat between themselves there as they now slip away and back into the peloton. These are the leaders, 4 men: Paolo Bettini, Rolf Aldag, Richard Virenque and Benoit Poelvet, are setting the pace today with the tough mountains, a huge buffer right in front of them, and there is still 110 kilometers to go. It's an awful long way today. Just watching the riders on this little descent. They're coming away now from the Côte du Mont des Princes as they make their way down to the valley before they start climbing all over again. A tough day is previewed today. We'll see you on OLN in a moment. And welcome back. We're looking at the early breakaway today in the Tour de France, heading to Morzine. There are 4 of them here: Bettini, Aldag, Poelvet and Richard Virenque. This is Walter Benetton with Patrice Algan, who've continued their attack after they crossed over in the places of the Mont des Princes. Looks as though Algan here has decided to try and progress this attack now. He wants a little bit more help, I would think, from Walter Benetton. But they are pulling away from the field. No initial time check coming at us yet. But as they continue now, we've got those 4 riders out in front. Just wondering, Paul, whether in fact these two are wise to press on at this stage.
Well, they're a long way behind their leading group of 4 riders. In fact, they're almost 8 minutes back, and all this would do would get them a small amount of publicity. If they feel like attacking, they might as well just save it until tomorrow, or try and do something on the final climb of the day, because we're still, after all, 106 kilometers to go to the finish. Médéric Klein, the man who is caught in no man's land, is a long way back. He's 3 minutes and 20 seconds behind, and these guys are not very much more than 30 or 40 seconds in front of the main field, who are basically riding along at a steady tempo for the moment, led by the US Postal Service. And there's the main field right now, and they're about to get swept up pretty rapidly.
I think they decided it wasn't worth the effort. Patrice Algan, by the way, in the front of the riders here. He's in his 3rd Tour de France. His previous 2, he's always pulled on for a short time the polka dot jersey as King of the Mountain, so he's a little bit of a reputation there. He's got to have to get that pretty soon before it runs away on the real steep mountains, I would think. They decide to opt out and slip back into the peloton. Interesting to note, Jan Ullrich and his boys not very far away from the US Postal. US Postal, remember, have the race leader on the team in Victor Hugo Peña, and therefore the race will see it as their job to keep setting the tempo here. But I think more interestingly, Armstrong just wants to keep Richard Virenque up front within reasonable shooting distance, because I don't think he views Virenque as an overall winner, but he won't want him to be given too much of a lead.
Well, now that those two counter-attackers have been caught, there's only one man caught in between the leading group of 4 and the main peloton, being led here by Yaroslav Ekimov. That is Médéric Clan of France. He was earlier in the breakaway of 5 men, but was left behind once they started to climb the rather difficult Côte de Mont-des-Princes.
Incidentally, Paul, Yaroslav Ekimov overnight being reported he's signed an additional year contract with Lance Armstrong's team, and he's already the oldest man in the race. He's going to go for another season.
Well, he's a great bike rider, and after he won his Olympic Games, in fact, back in 2000 when he won the time trial there, the US Postal Service said to him he could stay with the team for as long as he wanted to continue racing. Such was his dedication to the sport and, of course, to the team, and that's great to see. He's a great competitor. I think that that retirement he put in a couple of years ago was something he needed psychologically, Phil, to keep himself in the game. As we look here at Richard Virenque, another man who has had a rather strange career, but you still, whatever he's done in the past, have to take your hat off to the fact that he will always go out on the attack and doesn't worry about what's going to happen on the following day's stage.
Looking here at the back of the group, Ralph Aldag, what a great, he's another old-timer as well. He's ridden the Tour 9 times. The only one he didn't finish, his very first one back in 1992. He's a very consistent bike rider. Now, 4 minutes gap, by the way, is the check now back to Clan, and 7:56 to the main field. So as we look now at the riders, the peloton chase at almost 8 minutes. Now remember, if you're wondering what happened to your regular daily dose of beef, well, OLN's coverage of the running of the bulls from Pamplona will return on Monday and every weeknight next week at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Well, looking at the Tour de France, US Postal have it under control, they will think, at the moment on this first day in the Alps. Already 4 riders have abandoned the race. We'll take a break. Welcome back on OLN. That's where we're going today on today's 7th stage of the Tour de France. Morzine Avoriaz. Avoriaz is actually the mountain right up there. We're finishing below that mountain today in the village of Morzine itself. A long, long, hot day in the saddle. 230 kilometers for the 2nd day running. We're looking at US Postal again, Paul, doing all of the work at the front. So this is what we expect when you've got a strong team in the race. You know, Lance Armstrong has won 46 yellow jerseys over the years, Paul, in the Tours de France. It puts him, I think it's 4th or 5th, I can't remember now, I think it's 5th overall. But he's very close now to challenging the greats of the Tour, like Merckx, Hinault, Indurain and Jacques Anquetil.
Well, he's writing himself seriously into the history books, and in fact, if he can win this Tour de France for the 5th time, he will be one of only 2 men in history to have won the Tour de France 5 times in a row. The other man to do that was, of course, the great Spanish man, Miguel Indurain.
He has 60 yellow jerseys, by the way, and that's a realistic target for Armstrong.
It certainly is, and I'm sure that if Armstrong can get close to that, he'll want to come back next year and try and make himself the greatest of all time and try and win the Tour for a 6th time. He knows it's going to be very difficult, but I'm sure in the back of his mind that is his great dream. And a lot of people didn't believe that Armstrong was a serious Tour rider, but in fact Jim Okovits, his confidant, has always felt that. But he has got a very strong team, and it really is remarkable that in fact it's his teammate Victor Hugo Peña is leading him by a single second right now. Ekimov is right up there ahead of Hincapie. I think all that will change dramatically today. A quick glimpse of the best challenger so far is Yoshiba Beloki, who I think will try and do a little bit of attacking on the final climb of the day.
Well, just inside 100 kilometers, a massive distance still to ride, of course. And Bettini, well, he was a name that a lot of people fancied today to go out on the attack. The champion of Italy, just a week that title was won by him before the Tour started. He is a rider, Paul, who has come back from serious injury in the early classics, and I think come back with terrific enthusiasm because he looks as sharp as he's ever looked.
It's very strange being a professional athlete because sometimes you need an illness or a sickness to give you a forced rest. Let's take a look at George Hincapie, who's riding superbly. He was sick at the start of the season with a strange parasite, which it took them a while to figure it out. It actually took George Hincapie out of the one-day classics in the month of April, and I think that's why George has come back probably keener and sharper than ever.
Indeed, and we're watching here the long, thin line of riders now. And well, they're going to keep an eye on Armstrong. I think he's the man that will have to make the move today. But the tempo riding being done by the US Postal Service is making a long, thin line of bike riders here. And the thing about the first day in the mountains, the top riders themselves hope that they feel as good as they expect to feel. But the poor old domestiques, their helpers who've been working hard to get the sprinters home first, they can be in trouble very early on. Now, if they are left behind on the climbs early on, and Paul Sherwen is one of those chaps occasionally who was left behind on the climbs, they have to take great risks on the way down because they can't afford to lose time.
Phil, that was very polite of you to say it that way around. I was trying to say it in the nicest manner possible so you didn't get offended. Well, I tell you what, it's tough. It is very tough for the guys who do get left behind, and a lot of the climbers put everything into this 3 days. The sprinters, on the other hand, have had all of the glory over the first week of the bike racing here at the Tour de France, and you really do have to give it everything on the descents as a non-climber, because that's where you actually have a chance of closing down the deficit on the front end of the main field. And it's a long, hard day in the saddle. You're trying to work out the night before what the elimination times are, because to stay in the Tour de France, you actually have to finish within a specific percentage of the winner's time on every single day. There's no question of getting dropped and cruising to the finish and finishing a couple of hours behind. The time limits are very, very tight, and in some of the mountain stages they can be as little as 30 minutes. And I can tell you, if you can't go up hills very well, it's quite easy to lose 10 or 15 minutes on a single climb. Well, I remain totally in awe of these riders every time I commentate on them, because you have to really ride these mountains to know how much they hurt, and how these boys fly over them at such speed, I'll never know. But watching them getting on to doing what is for them about a 6.5 to 7 hour day in the saddle, having left Lyon earlier today. And one or two riders in trouble. If you're just joining us, the hot news of the day is the points leader and four-time stage winner Alessandro Petacchi has retired as soon as the climb started. Another top sprinter in his 10th tour, never finished one of them. Jan Kersipuu has gone. First timer in the Tour, Olaf Polak from the Gerolsteiner team, and also out with sunstroke today, Jesus Manzano of Kelme. He's gone too. Concentration of the boys here from US Postal, Floyd Landis that was, as they keep up the pace. So remember, we're on early today, and that's a nice little modern art for you as the race continues here on OLN. And there's a little viewers. We welcome you back to our coverage here on OLN of today's stage 7 of the Tour de France. That's Morzine. Above is the mountain of Avoriaz, and this little town here, tucked away high in the Alps, is agog, waiting for the riders. They can see the race just like you can on a big screen in the town square. The coffee shops are doing a roaring trade. We've seen lots of foreign people here too, from Americans to Australians to South Africans. That's a nice shot too as the helicopter comes off this little ridge, searching for the peloton of the Tour de France today. Currently 8 minutes and 10 seconds and losing ground on the breakaway of Paolo Bettini, Rolf Aldag, Benoit Poilvet and Richard Virenque. There was also Médéric Clon. He is now stuck in no man's land, going backwards at 4.5 minutes. Interesting to see that that group is losing time on the four-man breakaway down to 8 minutes, but they will lose a fair amount of time on the final climb of the day, and this is rather strange to see. The man in the yellow jersey, Victor Hugo Peña, the Colombian teammate of Lance Armstrong, has actually dropped back into the cars with another teammate there because his job today is turning round somewhat. Although he's the leader of the bike race, today he has to work for the team, and he realizes sooner or later he's got to hand the reins back to the captain of the ship, Lance Armstrong. But doing this in the yellow jersey has not pleased some of the purists of the Tour de France, and many of the radio stations here and newspapers have criticized Peña. They are saying, what is this? The yellow jersey, the leader of the Tour de France, acting as a domestique, going back and collecting bottles for another rider, in his case Lance Armstrong. And that is not the way you do things in the Tour de France when you are the race leader. And I must say, it's something I can't ever recall seeing before. I have to think about that long and hard to see whether somebody has done it before, but it has to be realistically looked at. He is a man who knows he'll hand over responsibility of leading this bike race to his team leader at some stage in the past. And I think he's obviously somewhat worried about the possibility of staying with Armstrong on this final climb of the day. Another abandon being announced over race radio, Luis Perez of Cofidis. It seems as if a lot of riders are starting to have a few problems with the heat today, Phil, because on a day like this, it is very important to keep your liquid levels topped up. And I believe some of the team doctors are advising their riders to drink between 15 and 20 of those small bottles they carry on their bikes during the course of today's stage.
Well, this has been a sunshine tour. We haven't seen any rain, although there is a rumour starting. There might be rain on top of Alpe d'Huez tomorrow. I can't see it in the clouds outside at the moment, but if it is, it'll make probably a cooling climb up to the summit of that great mountain. So we've now lost Perez. He has also abandoned the tour today, so we're now down to 189 riders.
Well, the leading group of 4 are on the slopes of the Côte de Creuset. On the right-hand side there, Paolo Bettini in the tricolor of Italy. Rolf Aldag, the old campaigner for Team Telecom, on the left in the pink and black jersey, just behind Bernard Poilvet of the Crédit Agricole team. They're always on the attack, always looking for a successful breakaway. And the 4th man in this break, the darling of the French housewife, Richard Virenque, winner of 5 times at the King of the Mountains competition. This is the man caught in no man's land right now, Médéric Clan. He was in the early breakaway, but not able to stay with the tempo that they set on the very difficult second category climb, the Côte de Mont-des-Princes.
I must say, Paul, thinking of Perez, he can only have had some sort of sickness, because he's ridden the Tour twice before and had great finishes. 41st in 92, and then it was a while before he came back, 32nd in 2001. Perhaps he's getting too old.
No, it could have a lot to do with the heat. You know, the heat over the last few days will have affected a lot of bike riders, and I was so surprised, in fact, to see Pataki abandoning the race early on. But this is a completely different scene we've seen at the front end of the main field. There is Big Jan himself, looking pretty mean right now, pretty slim and cut, finally ready for action for the first time this year. And I'll be interested to see how he goes up this big climb, because it'll be his first big test in the last 2 years. He's 12th overall after the 6th stage, and not very far behind Lance Armstrong in the overall classification. The front of the main field is all blue. That's Lance Armstrong's team all around him, looking after him. But we've now seen much more of the pink Once jerseys, who up until now have had a very simple ride in the Tour de France. They haven't had to do any chasing. They haven't had to do any pacing their leaders back in. It's the teams of the leaders now, Phil, who are coming to the front of this bike race.
Nice view of the helicopter there as it shoots the riders with that Wescam camera on the left-hand side of the helicopter's body. Very skilled flying indeed. As we look at the face of Richard Virenque and his teammate Paolo Bettini, they're leading the charge while we take a break.
And welcome back to Stage 7 of the 2003 Tour de France. We're going to get back to Phil and Paul in just a few minutes, but right now it's time again for another Bike 101 with Bob Roll. Bob, we see 4 men in the breakaway right now. 2 of those guys are Quick Step. They're 8 minutes out ahead of the peloton. What's going on? What's the strategy?
The strategy here for the Quick Step team, they know they don't have a real solid GC contender, so they've sent their 2 strongest guys left in the bike race. That would be Richard Virenque, who has won here before. Actually, the last time the race finished in Morzine, Virenque won the stage, and Paolo Bettini of Quick Step. Also, they have Ralph Alday from the Telecom team in that breakaway, and Benoit Poilvet from the Crédit Agricole team. What's going on is that the US Postal team has to calculate how much energy they need to expend from one day to the next. And if they don't perceive the riders in the breakaway to be a big threat on GC, Bettini or Virenque or the other 2, they will let them get some time. They know that they can give them a certain amount of time, and even if they lose the yellow jersey for a couple of days, they're trying to win a 3-week bike race, not just a 1-stage hit. And Quick Step, desperate for some results in this race, have sent 2 guys up the road, Bettini and Virenque. Interesting tactic there. Bettini was really working the break over, but when he heard that Virenque was coming across, he shut down the tempo. Virenque caught the front group, and now they're working together. If I'm Aldag or Poilvet, I'm not doing 1 micron of work. I will never see the front of the bike race, because you know they're putting in a solid raid and you have to conserve your strength so they don't get away from you in the finale of the bike race, assuming that Postal doesn't put on the coals and chase them down. Postal's still the strongest team. They're at the front of the peloton, just keeping that gap reasonable because they know the attacks will come on the Col de Ramaz. It's just a question of how much time the breakaway gets before we get to the bottom of that, and I know that Virenque is going to be attacking on that climb. Bettini, very strong as well, is going to do all the tempo to there, so it's a very exciting race. It's a race within a race. race. There's the GC battle that Postal is going for, and there's the stage win that Quick-Step is on the boil for today.
And right now, 8 minutes lead is a reasonable lead.
8 minutes is a decent
okay.
lead. They might need a little bit more time than that once it starts heating up in the peloton, though. If there's any attacks from Once, you know that it's going to be a very hot tempo, and I think that Virenque might want to have more like 10 or 12 minutes at the bottom of the big climb of the day, the Col de la Ramaz.
More insight from Bob Roll still to come, but let's get back to the action of Stage 7. Phil, Paul, take it away.
Thank you very much, Kirsten. And Bob there. I wonder who he's going to predict in the sprints next week, because Pataki's not in there now and he's been guessing him every day. We're back with the leaders today. These are the 4 riders still clear: Bettini, Aldag, Poilve and Virenque.
Tyrium International.
Well, the gap at 92 kilometres, they've been they still have to go, so we're inside the magical 100 now, but they've still got to climb the Col de la Ramaz, but we're on the Crusaille at the moment, and this is a climb which I think will hurt the legs just that little bit more. There's only one small sprint today still to come, but those 6-second time bonuses now will not mean so much. And I think this is the way we expected it to go, Paul, that Armstrong, unless somebody really ruffles his feathers, is going to just try and hold this race together. I think tomorrow is the day he will want to attack. Remember those images of a couple of years ago when he looked straight at the face of Ulrich and invited him to attack on Alpe d'Huez?
What a day that was as well. It was a day when he caught all of us out. We thought he was having a hard time. He kept looking at the TV cameras who were all around him and putting on a rather interesting grimace as if he was suffering. But when it came down to the final ascent of the Alpe d'Huez, he proved to all of us that he was in fine form. I think today he will sit back and see as to whether there are any serious attacks coming from his challengers like Yoshiba Bolocki, Iban Mayo, Jan Ulrich, and he will decide his tactics on the terrain of the final climb of the day. But if he does see that Ulrich is having a bit of a hard time, he might put the hammer down then, because he feels that Ulrich is starting to look like a serious challenger, and he knows how dangerous the German can be, especially in the last week of the Tour.
Indeed, indeed. There's another nice little montage. There's plenty of those in this region. They love their Tour de France here. The Alps coming in after the Pyrenees in the Tour de France. Richard Virenque, still the darling of the crowd, despite the fact he was one of the main protagonists in the Festina affair, the drug scandals of 1998. Took him a long time to confess, but he did confess he used drugs, and it didn't seem to make any difference to his popularity with the people. They still love him. And Virenque here still wins the big stages in the mountains. He just is a man for the climbs.
Well, when you look at the list of climbs that he's won in the past, Phil, way back in 1994 he got his first victory there, and that was at the top of Luzardiden, and then he won at Cotteret, then Courchevel. He actually has won in Morzine before, and that was taking advantage of the descent down towards the finish line when he ripped away. He's actually, for a light rider, a very good downhill man, and that's probably what he's banking on, getting to the top of the final climb of the day with a slight advantage over the main field, and then they'll never see him again.
Well, Bettini seems to be working with him, but I think Aldag and Poilve are now saying to themselves, look, these two are on the same team. If we start to try and help them, they'll split us off the back because they're too good. So they're going to try and follow for a little while now, I think, and just make full use. Back to poor old Médéric Clan. He's slipping slowly away. He's now 5.5 minutes down, enjoying his ride through the mid-afternoon sun here in France in the Alps, and isn't going to do much about anything except wait for the peloton to pick him up. They are now 3 minutes behind him.
Well, all he can do right now is just ride a steady tempo, one that is not too difficult for him to maintain. He doesn't want to over-fatigue himself, because we must never forget this is just the first day on the mountains.
Now, this is life at the back of the race here, and it looks to me as though we've got Brad McGee sitting near the back, which is a little bit of a surprise. I hope he's okay, the leader for the first 3 days. So, the Tour de France goes on. And we're back on the Route de Tour. The Danish flags are flying for their men down there, as we're looking at the riders today beneath the hot sun. 230 kilometres heading from Lyon to Morzine. We are in the heart of the Alps. Now, don't forget, if you're enjoying OLN's coverage of the Tour de France, then join Bob Roll Thursday nights for all of the latest news and highlights from the world of cycling and indeed multi-sport, when Summer Sports Zone will return August the 7th, but only on OLN. This is Médéric Clon. He was dropped by the leading group and is now riding 6 minutes 5 seconds behind them and just waiting for the peloton, who are just inside 1 minute 50 now behind him. So they're closing in very, very fast indeed on him, while the leaders are at 8 minutes 10 seconds. So they're holding their own up front as they head towards the Col de la Ramaz. A little bit of the beautiful artistic farmers we have around France here, especially in the region of the Haute-Savoie on the borders of Switzerland. Isn't that beautiful? They love the Tour de France, there is no doubt about that. Back live is just looking over the top here of the last climb, the Crusade. And again, Bettini scoring well here and keeping his lead in the Tour de France. Richard Virenque is the other man. Now we can look down at pictures live again now as we continue. Another piece of artistry there too by the farmers. Looking great. The whole tour going extremely well. Merci. Thank you. 8 minutes 10 seconds, Paul. We're looking at about 88 kilometers to go, 55 miles. But we do have the big climb in between now. We're talking of the running the bulls from Pamplona, Paul. Just take a look at this. They've got them all corralled here.
They certainly haven't got them all corralled. There's the yellow jersey cow, and he's pretty close to the King of the Mountains cow, and of course the green jersey cow as well. So that is rather an incredible thing that the farmers have done out there on the roads of the Tour de France today. This is Pavel Padrinos, the Czech rider, a big powerful man. He will lose contact, I think, later on in the day. The important thing for Armstrong is to keep his team with him as long as possible. The strength in depth of this team was proven in the team time trial, and Armstrong there in the middle of the screen, looking as calm, as collected as possible, complete and utter concentration. Look at that face. He's thinking about what his strategy is going to be on today's course, and I have a feeling that they may well have had some kind of a plan this morning, but that plan, I think, will only be evolved once we get to the final climb of the day. They want to see how everybody reacts on the first mountain pass of this year's Tour de France.
I think his total strategy today is just see how it goes. He hasn't got a plan to attack. He's going to see if anybody tries it on him, and he'll try to react. But I don't think he has any plan to move today. I think he's waiting for tomorrow. Very tough day to the top of Alpe d'Huez. He's won there before. He knows the roads. But we've climbed that mountain 22 times since Fausto Coppi first won the climb back in 1952. Looking down at the peloton, thinning out dramatically. 5 riders have abandoned today, and if you're just joining us, Pataki, the green jersey points leader, has gone, so that's now on the shoulders of Baden Cook. Jesus Manzano has gone with sunstroke. Sprinter Jan Kurzepeu has simply gone, along with Olaf Pollock, and a surprise retirement of Luis Perez. He has just abandoned for the Cofidis team as well.
So important on a day like this to keep the liquid levels topped up. You can see one rider just moving up the outside of the main field, a CSC rider of Tyler Hamilton, and he's been back to the team car to take on board drinks. Riders are allowed to take on board drinks once they've completed 50 kilometers of a stage like this, and they're allowed to keep doing it up until 20 kilometers to go. They are not supposed to take on board drinks once they've started a mountain pass, because that leaves too much interpretation into the rules, and you can actually hang on to a bidon for 400 or 500 meters, and that's something the judges do not want to see happen.
No, this is the Tour de France. It's all your own effort. We're on the Côte de Crusade here for the main field. We've already seen the leaders go over the top. Virenque taking maximum points again. Bettini in second slot, but Bettini will still lead in the King of the Mountains today if he keeps up that progress. But I think Virenque thinking much longer term here to try and improve on his great run of King of the Mountains titles from 1994 right through to 1997, and he popped up and he also won it in 1999. Just missed out in 98 when he was thrown out the Tour for the misuse of drugs.
Bettini looks pretty cool at the moment, and he's a man we thought would be looking for a breakaway on one of the early stages of the Tour de France, but maybe not on a mountain stage. He is a very attacking rider. He's coming back from injury this season, and since he won his national title just 1 week before the start of the Tour de France, he's been promising to go out on the attack, and today is the big move, the first big day in the mountains. After pounding along over the flat stages at speeds of approximately 45 kilometers an hour, we're now changing to the complete other end of the scale. A lot of these climbs will be ridden at only 30 to 35 kilometers an hour average speed, which is around about 18 to 22 miles an hour. A complete different pedaling action is required. Here is Klein. He's further down the road. He's 1 kilometer to the summit of that third category climb, the climb called the Côte de Creuset, and he's around about 6.5 minutes in arrears. But in fact, the main field, Phil, will shortly be seeing him because they're not much further than about a minute behind him.
That's right. He might just about get the points here for 4th place before they pick him up. And sinuous roads in this part of Haute-Savoie, very narrow, plenty of them, lots of changes of direction for the riders, in and out of real hot sunshine, occasionally in the woods down there. But it's a beautiful area to spend a lot of time with a bicycle or without. Indeed, a lot of hiking goes on in this section of the world, an area overlooked by the giant Col du Salève. It's a 3rd category climb that they're on at the moment, the Côte de Creuset, and it's just over 5 miles in length, so it's a long steady drag of around 4% average gradient. Nothing like the big one that's coming up though, the Col de la Ramez, 5,300 feet high when they go over the top of that.
Well, the main field there, you can see just going through the 1 kilometer to go, but the leaders have already gone over the summit of the Côte de Creuset, and Virenque got himself maximum points there, 10 points for him in that King of the Mountains competition, ahead of Paolo Bettini and Bernard Poilvet of the Crédit Agricole team. But I'm pretty certain right now they can almost see Médéric Klein just in front of them. I think they've slowed down for the moment, but let's not forget there are still 86 kilometers to go to the finish of today's stage. This is Pavel Padron, this is Armstrong himself, right in the middle of the screen there, looking very calm and collected. Yaroslav Ekimov on the front, 2nd position, Pavel Padronov. 4th position just on the right-hand side there, Georgi Hincapie, but a lot of riders moving to the front, and we'll be talking today about a lot of different riders as Médéric Klein has survived to get himself 5th place on the top of this mountain.
So we're looking down the peloton, and Médéric Klein just trying to hang on for as long as he can, but they're coming very swiftly now. They're about a bit behind him as the peloton's spreading out here on this nice wide main road as they head up towards that end of term climb. There's only one big climb left today now, and then there's a little 3rd category as they run away from the Col de la Ramez down into the valley to Les Légers, and then keep on going and you'll find the town of Morzine. Pretty much downhill once you're over the little climb of Légers. Very, very fast finish. Leads me to think that if you can get over the top with a good lead, and if you've got the quality of descending of somebody like Gilberto Simoni, then you might have a chance of staying away to the finish. Dodging the central reservation pieces here as the riders are now continuing on their way. The beauty of the Tour de France today, with the big mountain still ahead. Stay with us here on OLN and enjoy all of the action to come. And welcome back to the Tour de France. We head to Morzine today. It's a long, long stage, the last really long one of the Tour de France as we conclude the opening week, 230 kilometers. But this one includes the giants of the Alps. The Col de la Ramez is still to come, but 5 riders won't cross the top of it. They've already abandoned, including the green jersey points leader, Alessandro Petacchi. Lance Armstrong, marshalling his troops from the US Postal team, are riding 8 minutes behind a breakaway of 4 riders: Paolo Bettini, Rolf Aldag, Benoit Poilvet and Richard Virenque. That's the situation on the road, and there is still 83 kilometers to go. So before the start today, we asked Frankie Andreu to try and give us some ideas to what the strategy might be with the US Postal Service team.
Chechu, today's a very big day, the first mountain day. Your role on the team for today?
Well, the team is riding well. We think that we've got a few guys who are really strong on the climb, so we hope to pass over those climbs with at least 3-4 riders. And we will also wait until see what are they doing the other guys, no? the guys like Ulrich, like Veloki, but the team is confident.
How many riders do you hope to have over the Col de Ramaz?
Well, I think Armstrong and Roberta will be there, and we hope also fast with Tricky, Beltran, and me.
Right, well, let's just have a look where they all are at the moment. Oh boy, they hold the first 8 places after the team times are, so they've got plenty of ways of outwitting the others just now. Manuel Beltran, the 9th member of the team and the newest member, he's only 39 seconds off as well, but he lies in 11th place. So they're in a very strong position as they go out now onto the first full day of the mountain. Okay, let's get back and have a look now at the leaders of the day. They've been out front for a long time. Richard Virenque joined them. There they are. Latest time check is just on 7 minutes and 55 seconds. Well, as we look at the 4 leaders, Paul, they've now, the peloton behind have swept up a Médéric Clon, so it's a very simple format now. 4 men at the front and about 7 minutes and 55 seconds. The whole pack, including Lance Armstrong's team.
Armstrong's team doing a very good job here. They've got the gap pegged at 7 minutes and 55 seconds. But there's still 50 kilometers to go, Phil, before we start that very big climb of the Col de la Ramaz. And I'd like to see just what sort of advantage these men can keep before they start that final climb of the day. If Richard Virenque can get to that final climb with 4 or 5 minutes lead over the main field, he takes a serious option on winning the stage down into Morzine. And let's not forget he won in Morzine as well a couple of years ago.
And let's not forget either, the one British rider in the race, David Miller, is still down there in this big pack, and we are rather hoping that Miller is going to be able to go with the moves on the big climb today. He's very confident. We were listening to him on French radio telling us his plans only yesterday.
But he was very confident about riding up along Lance Armstrong this afternoon. He too seemed to think that the strategy of US Postal Service and Lance Armstrong is basically the strategy we would expect on the first day in the mountains. Armstrong really just to keep an eye on what's going on with his major challenges. If he does decide to go out on the attack, I think it will be because he sees a certain amount of weakness coming from the other challengers. If he sees a weakness in the legs of Jan Ulrich or of Yoshiba Beloki, then he will go out. But he's got an incredible team, Phil, which is basically built for the mountains. Roberto Heras, Beltran, who's brought into the team just before the Tour de France, Peña, Rubiera, they are the men who should be able to look after Lance Armstrong in the big mountain passes. But right now, they have to take responsibility of the race. They're assuming the leadership of the Tour de France and just riding a steady tempo to make sure that the leading group of 4, Aldag, Bettini, Poilvet and Virenque, don't get too much of an advantage before the last climb of the day.
Richard Virenque has done it before. He went in an early break on the road to Mont Ventoux and he stayed away to the finish. When Lance wiped out the rest in his pursuit, he couldn't pick up Richard Virenque, and I'm sure that's his plan today. There he is, Richard Virenque out in front. The gap is hovering at 7:55, so they've closed it slightly. Hasn't moved for a little while though. And Virenque is in a good position to take over the race leader's yellow jersey, but he must finish with a lead of in excess of 1:52. That's his deficit at the moment. Bettini better placed than Virenque. I'm not sure though Bettini can go over the top of the Ramez with his better climber teammate.
I think I'll have to disagree with you there, Phil, because I think he will, actually, because I think Paolo Bettini is in absolutely fine form here right now. The overall classification, Victor Hugo Peña still leads his teammate Lance Armstrong by a single second, and the top 8 places are still made up of US Postal riders. The closest challenger is Yoshiba Beloki, and he's 33 seconds behind Peña and 32 seconds behind Lance Armstrong.
Well, I must say, Bettini's looking extremely good today. And if he's got the legs, Virenque will certainly ask him to try and keep with him, that's for sure. This is the man who went away very early on today and then heard his teammate was coming across, so he got the breakaway in the end to slow down and wait for him. And now they're very strong. The race goes on. Ramez is just ahead. Don't go far away here on OLM with the Tour. And welcome back as we look around here, the Haute-Savoie region of France on the borders of Switzerland, the longest stage today taking us to Morzine from Lyon. and that the riders are not hanging about. US Postal have managed to keep most of the field under control today, but up front by some 7 minutes and 40 seconds are 4 breakaway riders: Rolf Aldag, Paolo Bettini, Benoit Poilvet, and the big danger man Richard Virenque, because he's such a good climber. Just looking here at the 4 leaders who are really flying over the road at the moment. Aldag and Poilvet no longer assisting in this breakaway. They are sitting at the back. They're the riders we call in this situation the ticket collectors, because they don't do anything. They just sit at the back of the train and check everybody's tickets.
Well, I'm surprised they are sitting back there, because if they want this breakaway to succeed, they really do need to contribute somewhat as we go to the back of the main field. And wearing number 8, the man who leads this bike race, Victor Hugo Peña, riding there up alongside Chechu Rubiera. His name is Jose Luis, but in fact he's been given the nickname Chechu by the rest of the team. Victor Hugo has got about 8 bottles on board here, and these bottles weigh around about a pound each, and he's got to pick his way up through the main field to deliver that to the rest of the boys.
And if 8 bottles weigh a pound each, that's 8 pounds, and that's already half the weight of his bicycle.
It's pretty impressive. He's a great bike rider. He really has enjoyed having the yellow jersey, but he now knows that the responsibility in the team has to go back to what it was at the start of the 2003 Tour de France. The fact that there is one lone leader in this team. His name is Lance Armstrong, the man trying to win this bike race for the 5th year in succession and join a group of very few riders who've been able to win the Tour de France on 5 occasions. Anquetil, Merckx, Bernardino, and more recently Miguel Indurain. And if Lance Armstrong does that, he'll be a member of a very select group of boys.
Indeed, you're absolutely right. As we're watching here, the main field now, courseway through. And just to remind you and let you know that if you're just joining us, the big news of the day, the 4-time stage winner, Alessandro Petacchi, is out today. When the road started to go up, he'd been seen riding at the back of the peloton, and he then decided to climb off his bike and get into his team car. Little bit of a surprise. He did go out. He was eliminated in the Dolomites in the Giro d'Italia when he was also the leader of that race on points. But this was a straightforward I'm giving up, and we were very surprised. So the green jersey now automatically passes to the shoulders tomorrow of Baden Cook, because he's got a good head on the points there. So I don't think the results at the finishing line today will affect that.
They certainly shouldn't do, because it should be Cookie first and Robbie McEwen second. So now we're looking at, of the 198 riders who started this Tour de France, there are now only 189 left, and there are only 15 teams left intact.
5 riders out today. The last one to go, Luis Perez of the Cofidis team. We've also lost the other sprinter, Jan Kersipu. He lost time yesterday as well, approaching the finish. And Jesus Manzano, the most unlucky, because he collapsed unconscious with sunstroke, and then the doctors thought he'd injured himself with the crash, and they whipped him off to hospital. He's okay now. That's the latest report we've had from the hospital, but he's out of the race.
They may not be the only abandons on the day, because the heat over the last couple of days, I think, has fatigued many of the riders out in the course. The temperature out on the road is around about 90 degrees Fahrenheit, but with the reflection coming up from these white roads, it's probably pushing it to in excess of 100 degrees Fahrenheit down there where the riders are at the moment. Humidity's not too bad either, about 35%. And it's a glorious sunny afternoon in France and in the Alps. These are the 4 leaders, and Richard Virenque doing what he does, as well as going uphill, goes down fast as well.
Well, I have to say that the 7 minutes 40 lead, Paul, it looks to me as though they may not stay away here, because that fast pace making by US Postal is keeping control of this breakaway, and I think, you know, they need more time on that before they get to the climb.
Richard Virenque needs at least 4 or 5 minutes advantage by the time they start the final climb of the day, when they go through the small town of Morzine. That's 193 kilometers covered, and then they've got the 15-kilometer climb. He could find himself losing 1 or 2 kilometers every 5 kilometers on the ascent if there is a big battle behind between the leaders of this bike race overall, the men like Lance Armstrong, Jan Ullrich, Yoshiba Belocchi, and of course Iban Mayo, the man who many people expect to be a good bike rider in the future. But Mayo, by the way, lost a lot of time in the team time trial, but in fact he's a man that a lot of teams are looking at right now to sign up for next season, because they reckon he's the next great big hope from Spain.
And I think he is. Yeah, you're right. But for the moment, it's Richard Virenque, the cheeky young imp from the quick-step team, the Frenchman who draws the French public all of the time, as they continue now to lead on this charge. 7 minutes 40 seconds. Pens and papers out. We're going to give you now our Subway trivia question as we go to break. What 5 riders have won both the overall title and the King of the Mountains in the same year? Think of the big names and I think you'll have the answer. We'll tell you when you come back on the other side of these messages. I'm not sure I've got all 5. I'll let you know when you come back. Now, in light of our Subway Tour trivia, you know, the crew throw these at me too as little test questions for me, so I'll keep my job a bit longer. And I've only got 4 so far. Sylvia Mace, I forgot about him in 1939. The other greats are there. Bartoli, Coppi, Bahamontes, the Eagle of Toledo, and of course, the cannibal himself, Eddie Merckx, did it 3 times. What a great rider he was. And there's the beautiful sight of the big peloton of the Tour de France. They're coursing the route today, 7:55 behind the 4 leaders now, but still 71 to go. And so, as we look at the field here, Paul, I think you've got somebody else who's packed in, have you?
Another abandoned coming out over race radio there, Michael Riesch. So now 2 men down for Team Gerolsteiner. But it really is starting to be a very tough bike race. And a lot of that is because of the pressure on the front end of the main field being set here by the team of Lance Armstrong, the US Postal Service.
Well, Mike, as we're looking at Eric Zabel at the moment, who's just gone to the back for drinks. He was involved in that unfortunate tumble with Robin McEwen about 5 miles, 8 kilometres before the finish. As a result, they didn't get the privilege of watching Alessandro Petacchi win the sprint, because I don't think they'd have beaten him. But he's gone anyway out of the race now, so they'll be thinking long term, because both Zabel and McEwen know they can climb the mountains. But interesting about Michael Riesch here, Paul, because it's his first Tour de France, and I really thought he had a good chance. Now just look at that.
Absolutely remarkable.
It's incredible what
People
the French think about, isn't it?
People have come up with some incredible, yeah, in fact.
Did you notice, Paul, the front wheel is going quicker than the back wheel?
Well, what's happening, he's going to get wheel spin. And he's probably got a large chainring on the outside there to just, he's probably doing a wheelie actually because of the speed of the back wheel. And it is remarkable the things that the French spectators have come up with this year in the 100th anniversary of the Tour de France, which was first organised back in July of 1903. It's a great year. We've still got 2 weeks to go. We've only covered 1/3 of the mileage so far before we get back up to Paris. And this will be good news for the leading group of 4, because they've now stretched that advantage back up to 8 minutes.
Yes, 8 minutes they're holding, and this is good news for the breakaway, because they're approaching the climb all the time. We've done 161 kilometres now. We'll be on that climb in just about 40 kilometres, slightly less, I would think. Ralph Aldijk seems to be setting the pace as well now too.
Well, it's a very tough day in the saddle for these bike riders right now, because it is a very hard day of racing. They went over a 2nd category climb at the start of the day, the Col des Portes, but at the end of the stage, the Col de la Ramaz is the first serious 1st category climb that we have. There are 2 2nd category climbs in the first part of today's stage. We've already gone over them. The Côte de Crozet is a 3rd category. There are 2 climbs left on the stage. The one that everybody is worried about is the Col de la Ramaz. It's 14.3 kilometres, almost 7% in gradient, 1,600 metres of climbing. That's almost 5,400 feet.
Yes, a tough day indeed, and this is only an hors d'oeuvre as to what is to come tomorrow. And for that reason, I'm not sure whether we will see any of the potential race winners attack on the climb of the Col de la Ramaz. I don't think Armstrong will. I think he'll wait, and if somebody does, he'll try to counter, but I don't think he'll push his luck. I think he'll wait, and we could be treated to a very small sprint from a group coming into Morzine. Now, Morzine certainly could not accommodate a mass sprint of a field at this size. The streets are quite narrow, so it will thin down, we hope. Chance to just dangle the legs there for cramp, but I think in these conditions, Paul, and with the special shoes these riders have, their feet actually get very hot.
Very hot. It's a lot of, you see a lot of riders, if you keep a close eye on the main field occasionally, you'll see riders actually taking their bottles of water off and spraying them onto their legs. And they really want to try and keep their feet as cool as possible. Most of the teams are using shoes with a special plastic sole, and on a day like this it really does start to hurt the feet. They keep the shoes exceptionally tight so they don't move around too much on the pedals, and it becomes rather difficult, especially when the temperatures soar to around about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Mikel Pradera is a man who we've seen riding for Team Once over the last couple of years. He had the unfortunate incident last year in the team time trial where he had a flat tire and the team decided to leave him behind on the side of the road, and he had to make sure he got himself inside of the time.
Just looking here at the man from San Diego, probably well used to weather like this, Floyd Landis, riding very, very well, coming back from a broken hip, can you believe, in training very early on in the year. He got himself back into shape, and Lance Armstrong gave him the nod to join the team for the Tour de France. He is a very talented bike rider, rode his first Tour last year and finished with distinction. They're holding this, they're keeping it. Our computer keeps telling us 7 minutes 55, but I'm not sure whether it's given up with the heat of the sunshine, because we have seen 8 minutes on the road there.
I don't think anybody's going to argue about 5 seconds for the moment, because those 5 seconds, once we start to get to the early slopes of the Col de la Ramaz, will start to tumble very dramatically. US Postal Service doing a magnificent job here. I think this is the best US Postal Service team we have ever seen put together over the years. It's been a gradual build-up since the first year that Lance Armstrong won the Tour de France in 1999. They did say then that the team was too weak. They weren't able to defend the lead of the yellow jersey. But since then, Phil, they have really become the #1 team in the world, and absolutely exceptional at the Tour de France.
Well, as we see the riders speed through here now, they'll be hitting speeds of around 50-60 kilometers an hour as they twist and turn their way off this climb. Boy, they really are going quite quick though, even so, and the gap still holding at 7 minutes and 55 seconds. Right. Now then, what would you like to do for $100? Well, visit America's greatest beaches for all the fun of summer, as Beach Ambush will return to OLN in August. There's the time for you, Sundays at 9:30 p.m. and that's Eastern and Pacific time. The Tour de France goes on, the riders keep dropping out, but Armstrong keeps control of the peloton as we head into the mountains. We'll take a break. And welcome back to the route of the Tour de France. These are the 4 leaders, still hovering at 8 minutes over the field today, and they still have 60+ kilometers to ride. And there are the names for you: Aldag, Bettini, Poirier and Virenque. They've been away almost from the gun. The Armstrong Express is all at the front of the peloton, keeping control of everybody else. Richard Virenque is the man he'll be most concerned about at the front. Now, we've told you that the Seiko team are riding today in wrong team colours, black and white. They'll get a heavy fine for that tonight. And if they do it again, they might get thrown out the race. But today they're having a little demonstration, because their bike manufacturers, Cannondale, have manufactured a new bike. Now, there are regulations against its use, and that's what they're arguing. They're saying their bike is quite safe. Now, I think Frankie Andreu, who's down around the start area this morning. Frankie, I think you've got one of those bikes with you, haven't you?
Seiko has just released a new prototype bike, which Simone will be riding today, the first mountain day of the Tour de France. This is Simone's bike. It's carbon fiber tubes pressed into aluminum. It's a prototype. It's not being sold yet. They might sell it in the future. Thing about this bike, it's 6.7 kilos. UCI regulations require that a bike be the minimum of 6.8 kilos. To get the weight up, they change the seat post, they change the saddle, and they put on a heavier water bottle cage. The little weights here are just for effect, to show that this bike is crazy light. I just picked this thing up. You cannot believe it. It is incredibly light. They have the climbing cerium wheels, and Simone's going to be riding this bike in this year's Tour as he tries to make up almost a 3-minute deficit on Armstrong.
Thanks, Frankie. Well, if there's a problem finding someone to ride that prototype, just send it to me. I'd love to sit on that bike. It looks superb. Now, remember that Seiko normally ride in red jersey, and they've got writing down the side of the current jersey which says "Legalize my Cannontail" as a protest against the UCI's minimum bicycle weight rule. They'll be back in red, I'm sure, tomorrow. There's the latest gap at the moment, Paul. We keep on saying it's 7 minutes 55, but I can't believe they're surely not riding one-on-one at the same speed, peloton and break,
seems to be locked in for the moment. I think it will start to reduce when we get just a little bit closer to the start of the Col de la Ramaz, because everybody will want to start that climb, all the big contenders at least in the first 10 or 15 places, and it's almost like a bunch sprint to the bottom of the climb. It's a very narrow climb, a steep climb at around about an average of 7%, so we'll see a general acceleration in the main field, and then for the first time I think we'll see that time gap of 7:55 start to reduce in size. Here we can see now different colored jerseys coming to the front. This is the team of Once moving forward. They'll be looking after Yoshiba Beloki. The green and white jerseys are looking after Christophe Moreau, who's just there, and behind him the man who everyone's regarding as the big evil challenger, Jan Ullrich himself.
Ulrich just out of our picture on the left. There he is, Jan Ullrich, and I have a sneaking suspicion that man is back and he's itching to get onto the climbs. Could well attack today, and we'll know soon as we head up towards the Col de la Ramez. We are now just over 60 kilometers, about 38 miles from the finish. The gap has finally dislodged a little bit. We're now just 3 seconds closer at 7 minutes 52.
As if the main field have slowed down just a little bit. It's a big job of work for the team management of US Postal Service, trying to work out just exactly how much pacemaking these men on the front have to do. If they allow the breakaway too much of a lead, then they will pass over the yellow jersey to a man like Richard Virenque or Paolo Bettini for a couple of days. I think they want to make sure that they pull those riders back close enough so they don't take the overall lead, but they're not too worried, I don't think, right now about the possibility of a stage victory. Here are the four leaders. Paolo Bettini, to me, looks as if he's in excellent form this year at the Tour de France. He is coming back from injury. Richard Virenque is the other man in the breakaway. Benoit Poilvet is the man in the green and white jersey in fourth position. And, of course, one of the old campaigners who's been at the Tour de France so many times, Rolf Aldag of Team Telecom.
But Bettini's never looked better. He was an April Fool baby back in 1974, born on April the 1st, and he's 29 years of age now. He has a tremendous list of good results to his credit. He won the World Cup, which was being top of the single-day races around the world, and he's now the world #1 as we speak. And here he is, the new national champion of Italy. He's never won that title before, but we never expected him really to come into the Tour looking like this, because he had a very bad crash in Gent-Wevelgem it was, back at the early start of the season. It took him a long time to recover from that. But he's back big time and looking good and very fresh.
Let's not forget he's a pretty impressive sprinter too, because he got himself a very good win at the start of the season in Milan-San Remo when he was led to the line by his own teammate. And on that occasion they finished first and third in a race known as La Primavera, or the Springtime Classic. Milano-San Remo won 7 times by Eddy Merckx, but in recent years it's turned out to be a race that's more often than not won by a lone breakaway down towards the end. We're now not far away from Monetier, and that is around about just outside of 60 kilometers to go to the finish. And we will, I think, see the first serious showdown of the Tour de France when we get to this climb with the Col de la Ramaz.
These really are hard roads now as they run down towards the last 65 kilometers today. Vyacheslav Yekimov, who's just signed an extension to his contract with USP for another year. He's going to the end of 2004. What a wonderful boy. He's 38 years old then. Gosh, he'll be almost on his pension, won't he? Stay with us here on OLN as we stay live with the Tour de France.
And welcome back to the 2003 Tour de France, seen exclusively here on OLN. The riders are inside the 60-kilometer mark on their way to the finish line here in the village of Morzine, France. Now, before we get back to the action, Mr. Bob Roll has a little show and tell for us here. Explain what we're talking about. I know it takes a lot of effort, whether we're on the flats or in the hills. You've got gears here.
Yes, this is not the latest hip-hop jewelry from the Bob Key collection. This is indeed the 53 chainring and the 12, used primarily on the flat stages of the Tour de France. This is almost 120-inch gear, and every pedal revolution, your bike goes about 10 feet down the road, just a little bit under. So when you're trucking along at about about 90 RPMs, you're covering a tremendous amount of ground in a very short period of time. This is a huge gear used when the speed gets very high. When we get into the mountain stages, you can see the difference in chainring sizes. This is a 39 and this is a 23. Most of the riders will use this while they're spinning up the climbs. The size of the gear is about half as big, so you're covering half as much ground. A much easier gear to push. This would be the top of the cluster when the chain comes all the way across, and this is the inside chain ring at the front of the bike. Huge difference. You can tell that the 53 is tremendously bigger than that.
Yeah.
And the 12 used during the flat stages is incredibly smaller. So when the guys are on the 23 by 39, you know that they're suffering, except for the climbers, and they're just ticking it over like a metronome up in the mountains.
Now, you have ridden in the Tour 4 different times. If you were out there today, which gear would you be in?
I actually would probably need this.
Granny gear.
23 on the front, 39 on the back. That's a negative gear. That might be the only chance I have to get over these mountains today.
And they still have a doozy of a climb to come. Let's get back to the action now with Phil and Paul.
Thanks very much, Kirsten. You'll be a cyclist yet once Bob gets the rest of that bicycle for you. We're watching here the 4 leaders. They have just been stopped by a closed level crossing. That's the main peloton behind. Not a lot of time lost, so they've got a slight gain, but they're still saying just inside 8 minutes is the distance for these on the peloton. So we're looking now at Richard Virenque, Poilvet, Bettini, Aldag, the escapers of the day, and what a day they are having. Well, I think probably, Paul, they probably lost no more than 15 seconds there at that closed level crossing. And I think the biggest problem is reorganising the chase. They're into a lovely tempo. Now they come to a grinding halt, and they've got to get back into the swing again.
Got themselves organised pretty quickly on the front end of the main field. The US Postal Service boys knew exactly what they had to do, and they picked up the pacemaking. And when you look at that big long line of the peloton, you know that in fact it looks as if the Breakaways did gain a bit of an advantage there, Phil, because the computer may be wrong. The time check coming through on race radio is 8 minutes and 51 seconds. So that incident probably gave the advantage to the Breakaway of around about 1 minute.
Oh, there's a lovely shot of the peloton there as they continue, leaving all of the work to US Postal, because they've got the champion-elect Lance Armstrong and they've got the current race leader Victor Hugo Peña. Armstrong's strategy will remain the same today. If you don't annoy him, he won't attack. I'm sure he's waiting for tomorrow. But I believe that once this mountain starts, there will be 1 or 2 riders go to see if Lance is actually as strong as he's giving the impression. Because 1 or 2 riders are saying they don't think he's going as well as he should.
There's been a lot of talk in the first week of racing here. Men like Gilberto Simoni and even Jan Ullrich himself have said, yeah, it's okay. We've seen that Armstrong's team is very strong, but we have not seen any proof that Lance Armstrong himself is powerful, and they may well see this as an opportunity to go out and try and attack him themselves. The time gap has gone up to 8 minutes and 51 seconds, which is about a minute again, I think, at that incident with the railway train just a few moments ago. I think Armstrong will sit back and see what the others do when we come to this first climb of the day. If he sees one of his challenges in difficulty, he'll put the hammer down as he has done in the past.
Yes, so they stopped for around 50 seconds in the end, because we're approaching 9 minutes the gap now. This has certainly aided Richard Virenque. He's one of the few riders in the race who can't wait to get to the slopes of the Col de la Remise, because he climbs mountains so quickly. And Aldag won't manage to hold on. I don't know about Poilvet. He's not a well-known rider with a big reputation yet. We'll have to wait and see. Live at the back of the field here with the Français de Jeu, as riders continue to get drinks up to the leaders. That's Christophe Mongin, the leader erstwhile in the King of the Mountains there. He's lost that jersey today. It will be passing over to Paolo Bettini tonight, who's been scoring nicely, and he's the next man in line for it.
Tough day in the saddle for everybody here on the roads of the Tour de France this afternoon. The temperature has been unbelievable, as it has been really since the Tour started in Paris over a week ago, and it really is remarkable to see that these guys are just battling to keep themselves topped up with fluid all the time. They can look at taking on board around about 10 litres of water on a stage like this afternoon, and many of them will be straight onto the scales once the race is finished, and the doctors try and make sure that the riders do not lose very much more than 2 kilos, which is the usual average weight that they will lose on a day like this.
Well, I must say that these riders have got this race nicely controlled today. A wise way, because remember, this is the first of 3 days in the Alps, and we go over all of the famous climbs this year in the Alps. The Col de Galibier is still to come, Alpe d'Huez is still to come. Very tough 3 days, and by the weekend many riders will not be in the race. Just passing under one of the autoroutes here as we continue heading down towards the finish in Morzine, and the gap is up. 8 minutes 51. Richard Virenque, well, he might thank his stars for that luck. We'll take a break. And welcome back to the road of the Tour de France today. 230 kilometers. We penetrate the Alps. Lance Armstrong riding with all of his US Postal team at about 8 minutes 57 seconds behind the 4 breakaways of the day. The big danger man up there is Richard Virenque. But this team, and remember, they also have the leader on it in Victor Hugo Peña. Third day in the leader's yellow jersey for him, as he sits 1 second better than Lance Armstrong in the overall classification. They're waiting now, I think, to see who will attack them on the climb of the Col de Ramaz, which is not too far along the road. But so far, US Postal have shown themselves to be up to it as a team with the leader already on it. They have come out front and they've set the tempo, and a man who's been doing an enormous amount of work has been Floyd Landis on the front here. Now, if you're wondering where the beef has gone, OLN's coverage of the running of the bulls from Pamplona in Spain will return Monday and every weeknight at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Well, these are the live pictures and a routine puncture, at least I hope it is here, for a rider from the Rabobank. Just can't quite get a clean. It looks as though it's Oscar Freire there who's had a flat tyre. It is, but he'll get back into the action very quickly. Two-time world champion. And now we've been telling you a little bit, courtesy of sponsors Subaru, driven by what's inside, as we've been looking at Lance Armstrong. 3 years ago, Lance Armstrong returned to the Tour as defending champion. Lance Armstrong came into the 2000 Tour de France with the naysayers questioning his win in '99, mostly noting the absence of '97 champ Jan Ullrich and '98 winner Marco Pantani. This would be Armstrong's motivation, and he would again start with a show of strength, finishing 2 seconds behind David Miller in the opening prologue, at the same time putting distance on his main rivals. The fireworks, though, would really begin in the Pyrenees on stage 10 at the base of the Hautecamp climb. Armstrong would launch his now trademark attack on the first difficult climb. Left in his wake were the likes of Marco Pantani and Jan Ullrich. Despite losing the stage to Javier Ochoa, Armstrong had to put himself back in the yellow jersey. But the race was far from over, and more memorable moments were in store. Armstrong conceding the stage to an insulted Marco Pantani on Mont Ventoux. Pantani retaliating on the slopes of Courchevel to win this day, only to later retire. And Armstrong showing his human side as he struggled up the slopes of stage 15, conceding 2 minutes to Jan Ullrich. But in the end, Lance would again use the race against the clock to seal his second Tour, beating Ullrich in the final time trial. A foretaste of the rivalry to come in 2001. Well, he's now looking for his 5th victory, and so far he's on course. But this weekend is a big test for Lance Armstrong. Hats off to the breakaway, I think, today, Paul, because the gap now of 9 minutes and 10 seconds, I think that might be good enough to win the day.
It should be, because they won't lose all of that much over the next 10 or 15 kilometers to the bottom of the climb. And the climbers like Richard Virenque and Paolo Bettini should be able to keep a fairly good tempo on the early slopes of the climb. And what if they go over the summit of the Col de la Ramaz with an advantage of 2 minutes or so, they shouldn't have much problem keeping that down to the finish, because it's a very rapid downhill into the small town of Fray, and then the slight ascent up to the Côte d'Ager, and then it's all downhill into the finishing line for the last 8 kilometers to Morzine.
Well, there's the working bodies of the riders in the Tour de France today, all concentrating, every man having to make his own effort, although they're ensconced in that big pack of cyclists, which is comparatively smaller now after the early climbs, because they've lost a few riders. Right in the centre there, the orange and green stripes were the Australian champion Stuart O'Grady. Just looking out, I can see I can pick out Davy Miller. Didn't see him, but I can assure you he is in there. The rider from Great Britain, the only British rider in the race. The yellow jersey on the shoulders of the first ever Colombian rider to lead the Tour de France, Victor Hugo Peña, and privileged to sit behind his team captain Lance Armstrong today. George Hincapie just in front, and then we start going through Chechu Ribera, Vyacheslav Yekimov, and it must be that Floyd Landis is doing a lot of the work at the front. And we always expect him up there. He's such a hard worker.
He's a tough boy. He's obviously been given the nod that he and Pavel Padronos have got to do the bulk of the work on the flatter part of today's course, along with Vyacheslav Ekimov. Those three men will more likely disappear once we start the climb of the Col de la Ramaz, and then the climbers of US Postal Service will take over the pacemaking. Men like Roberto Heras, the new man in US Postal, Manuel Beltran. Of course, Victor Hugo Peña will be called upon to work on the early slopes of the climb, and the man who is always alongside Lance Armstrong in the mountains is good old buddy Chechu Ribera. Virenque looking over at Rolf Aldag. He wants to just try and ascertain how the German is doing. Aldag is not a great climber, but I tell you what, he's enjoying his day at the front.
Well, Aldag gave him a smile there. I don't know whether he was trying to sort of convince him he's feeling great. But Big Ralph isn't a great climber, but he is a great bike rider. He's been the champion of Germany. He's been around a long time. He's been through all this before. He knows exactly what to do, does Aldag. And so they're not going to psych him out. This is his 9th Tour de France. The only one he never finished was in 1992. He's finished every year since then. Virenque will know now, with a gap coming at him from his team manager of just over 9 minutes, that if he can get this group to the foot of the climb, then he will win the race. It's a tough undulating road down into Morzine. It tips downwards towards the end. He's been there before as well.
He's been there before. In fact, 3 years ago he got himself the win at the bottom of the descent, took incredible risk coming off the Juplin mountain, and it was after a breakaway like this that he might manage to get himself the advantage to win the stage.
Arnoldo prepared to work here despite the heat of the day. This is now quite a unit here because they all believe that they can do it. So still ahead of us, don't forget, we have our commercial-free half hour, and that will be brought to you by Powerbar. Welcome back. This is a rather busy finishing line in Morzine, the arrival of the Tour Caravan, which comes in usually around an hour ahead of the race, and it's about right, I suspect, as the riders are heading up now towards the lower slopes of the Col de la Ramez. A wonderful crowd that have been enjoying a day of entertainment down here. There are 2 former world champions down here at the moment, by the way. Luc Lebon is down here, and Francesca Moser. We're looking at the leader now, and this here is Richard Virenque. Let's remind ourselves a little bit about the last time that Tricky Ricky, as we used to call him, Richard Virenque, arrived here. Here he is looking over his shoulders. Where are they, he was saying. This is when he was winning stage 16 of the Tour de France in the year 2000. This is a great moment for him. He made a wonderful descent coming into the town. And then he was back, and he was so delighted, riding for the Italian team Colti there. Now he has a real chance to do it again because he's in a breakaway of 4 as he heads up now towards the big climb of the day. Still at the big tempo here, Paul, and there's the latest time check coming on the computer, 8:35, 44 to go, so they've started to recover the time lost at the closed level railroad crossing.
Well, it certainly hasn't come down that dramatically. The big, strong, flat boys of the US Postal Service, Padronos, Floyd Landis and Vyacheslav Ekimov, are being called upon to do an awful lot of pacemaking here as they sit on the front end of this main field, dragging the bunch along at 27, 28 miles an hour on the flat part of the course. In between the 2 climbs, the Côte de la Cruzée and the one that everybody has been fearing on today's stage, the Col de la Ramaz at 1,600 meters. 5,400 feet on altitude. In the yellow jersey there in 6th position, Victor Hugo Peña, for the first time now, Phil, starting to ride in front of Lance Armstrong, who is right at the back there of the line of the Posty boys.
There's the beauty of the valleys of the Haute-Savoie here, of the giant cols that are around. It was in this region where Louis Ocaña won his big Tour de France in 1973. He was climbing so well that year in this region with the Col de Salève, which overlooks the area as well. way below our helicopter. The 4 men really have been the heroes of the day today, out front for the vast majority of these 230 kilometres. And if they do survive to the end, this will be, without doubt, the longest escape of the Tour. And we're on the 8th day of the Tour today. About 25, 26 miles to go. I know many of you do like me to talk in miles as well as kilometres. That's 42 kilometres from the line.
Well, I tell you what a hot day in the saddle it has been for these bike riders, because the temperature's 88 degrees Fahrenheit in the valley roads. Over the summits, though, it's gone down a little bit. It's around about 70 degrees, and the riders will be looking forward to the coolness of the very fast descent down to the finish line in Morzine. And in fact, the finish line in Morzine itself at around about 1,000 meters in altitude, which is 3,000 feet.
Well, as we watch the riders here course through the valley, I'll just remind you of the overall situation as it was this morning. By the way, Armstrong a minute behind his teammate Peña. All of US Postal were holding out the top places 8 overall, but Peña defending a 1 second lead over Armstrong, his real team captain. Could all alter now, of course. These 4 riders are clear of the field. If they were to finish with a lead of more than 2 minutes, they would be the top 4 riders in the Tour de France.
It's going to be very interesting to see how those men at the front end of the bike race do handle this very difficult climb. Richard Virenque in his past was a very good climber and shouldn't really lose very much time at all, but he's not the man that he was back in 1992 and 93 when, as a young rider, he came to the Tour de France for the first time. I think they will lose a certain amount of that time, but he should not lose 8 minutes on a climb like that. He lost around about 5 minutes on the ascension of the Mont Ventoux last year when he was being chased down by Lance Armstrong. But today, I don't think Armstrong really has the incentive to chase hard behind a breakaway like this. He's thinking more about tomorrow being the first crucial stage for him in the overall tactical book that he's got written out.
A little bit of interesting situation at the front here, Paul. The Armstrongs boys, I think, have been called off a little bit, saying, hey guys, let somebody else do the chasing. Drinks all round. Floyd Landis there. Coming up on the far right is Jens Voigt, a man who was in the breakaway yesterday. I think it was yesterday, might have been day before. No, day before, 2 days ago. Fassa Bortolo still wanting to make an impression despite the fact they have now lost their 4-time stage winner. And I thought I could just see Tyler Hamilton. And I'm with son, I couldn't read that.
It was something to do with what the birthday name is today, Saint Bernard, I think it is. But anyway, this is at the back end of the main field. And obviously, Fassa Bortolo today will have to change their tactics as well, because up until now, Alessandro Petacchi has got them all of their glory. And they will be expecting the man Ivan Basso, was the best young rider in the Tour de France last year, to ride at the front end of the bike race when we start to begin these climbs. The man for Team Cofidis will be the British rider David Miller, who started the Tour de France in 2nd place in the overall classification by 0.08 of a second. But all of the front end of the main field now, Phil, as we get closer to this first serious climb of the Tour, is being made up by the big heads of state. Yoshiba Belocchi, Christophe Moreau, Jan Ullrich, and of course they're all queuing up for the back wheel of a certain man by the name of Lance Armstrong.
Well, we are getting close to the start of the climb now. It's a 14-kilometre climb, and I think Lance has suggested to the boys they don't keep too much of a high tempo on, because they might be under attack once those slopes start. So there's all sorts of things happening in that peloton right now. The gap is 8 minutes and 35. Jan Ullrich has moved right up now alongside the yellow jersey of Victor Hugo Peña. Ullrich has made no secret of the fact in the papers he will attack in the Alps, and we've never seen the German really ride well for nearly 2 years now. He's been a very bad boy. He's been booked for drunken driving when he rammed his Porsche into a bicycle rack. He's been stopped in nightclubs for using the social drug ecstasy. All were criminal offences, of course, in Germany. He's been suspended in cycling as well. So now I hope he sorted himself out, because just before the Tour began, the 29-year-old, his wife Gabby had their first child. He says it's all back. And I have a feeling this man is going to prove it. He had a wonderful Olympic Games. He got a medal in the road race, superb. He was so strong. He got a medal in the time trial in Olympic Games as well. It was a silver medal then to match his gold of the road race. So we'll see, because we believe that he is the truly most talented cyclist in the world. But you still have to get the form and the legs and put your brain into gear as well.
Lance Armstrong always says that. He says the most talented bike rider he has ever seen in his career is Jan Ullrich. Paolo Bettini starting to suffer from the heat here in the lead right now. It is starting to come down. It's down to 8 minutes and 10 seconds. And very shortly, they're going to start the first serious climb of this year's Tour de France, the Col de la Ramaz.
And really, these riders are on the lower slopes of it now because it is a very long, steady climb. We'll go through a small time bonus sprint on the way, which they may or may not bother to sprint for because they've got bigger fish to fry today to conquer the mountains and win the day. We'll take a break. And welcome back to the beauty of today's stage of the Tour de France. The beauty, that is, unless you're riding the race, because it's very hot down there today. Stage 7, 230 kilometers, heading into the Alps. They are on, well, the leaders are on the lower slopes now of the Col de la Ramez, heading for the time bonus sprint at Mussy. The 4 leaders still clear by 8 minutes and 18 seconds, the latest check. It is a very, very good lead indeed. Right, well, we've been taking a look at young and up-and-coming riders during the Tour de France. Infinity, Accelerating the Future, are responsible for that. Now, we've chosen this time Iban Mayo. According to Iban Mayo, the future is orange. The orange, of course, of the all-Basque team, the Euskaltel Euskadi team. He's in a race leader's King of the Mountains jersey here. But Mayo is charged with leading the team, and this his 3rd Tour appearance, and is a strong contender, you know, for the top 10. And he'll certainly look for a stage win, which I think is his first ambition. He's a great climber. He's a light man at 157 pounds. He stands at 6 feet. He rode well this year, 2nd place in the Dauphiné Libre, but he won on the same finishing line as today's stage of the Tour de France exactly a month ago in that race. Well, he's not in the hunt yet because he's in the main field and he's riding some 8 minutes and 18 seconds back. Well, whichever way you look at it now, Paul, these boys may have made the right call today. They may pay for it tomorrow, but good bike riders they are. They might well recover for a different day tomorrow. This is the sprint down at Mussy. No sprint at all. Bettini takes it from Aldag and Virenque.
Very important, though, that Bettini got himself the 6-second time bonus. We were saying just a few moments ago, well, the time bonuses are not that important. There's a big difference between the position of Paolo Bettini and Richard Virenque in the overall classification. They started the day less than 20 seconds apart, and I think Paolo Bettini was looking to get himself that time bonus, because if these two men survive to the finish, he will try and give the victory to his teammate Richard Virenque. But he, on the other hand, would be the leader of the bike race overall. Confirmation of the result, Bettini ahead of Aldag, with Virenque getting himself the 3rd place finish there. We're now on the foot of the climb. We're now looking at 14.5 kilometers to the summit, and we're looking at 25 kilometers to go.
Yes, good point that, Paul, because Bettini himself has only finished one of his 2 previous tours. He was 70th in 2001, back after a 2-year break. He didn't start the 13th day in the year 2000, but he has got a stage win at Dax to his credit in that same year. Now, just remember, Paul, that these are the valley roads. We've been through some of the big climbs today. The Breakaway getting away before the Col de Port, and on it went over the Mont des Princes. But now we're looking up to the big climb itself, which takes us up to over 5,200 feet, and that's the Col de la Ramez. 14.3 kilometers, that's about 9 miles of climbing, and then a little hill after on the way down, and then they bounce into the valley. And as you know, because you've been to Morzine, it's great, must be great, those last 10 kilometers.
Last 10 kilometers are fun because they're all downhill, and the times that I came to Morzine during the Tour de France, it always came over the climb of the Jouplan, and the banner indicating 20 kilometers to go was at the summit of the Jouplan, and if you crossed there already knowing the winner, you knew you had to take a lot of risks on the descent to make sure you got yourself inside the time limit. Now look at that shot there. You get a chance just to see Richard Virenque is already on the small chainring, the chainring on the inside. A lot of people have been asking us about the gear ratios riders will use on a stage like this. Well, in the mountains, the majority of riders will have a 53-tooth chainring on the outside, and that's for the flatter part of the course. But on the inside, nowadays, they use a 38 or a 39-tooth chainring to give them a lower development of gear ratio for the mountain passes. And you can see right now, we're coming to the steeper part of the climb, and all these riders are on that small chainring there on the inside.
Yes, well, this, of course, is the start of the climb now. They're settling in. They're finding their crash helmets rather uncomfortable because your heads just, you simply want to scratch them and you can't. because the sun is burning into them. They also get things like bees flying in there. They can't get them out, and it creates quite a problem. But on the last climb tomorrow, they will be able to take them off and continue on the climb without them. But today, this is not a climb to the finishing line. They must keep them on under new rules. And as I say, one or two riders trying to provoke the argument to get the rules stopped.
Well, I think it's a good argument to have them racing out on the open roads, because the sport has become so dangerous over the last few years with the speed that the riders are charging along at. But on the big mountain stages, I really wouldn't like to ride some of these mountain passes with temperatures at 35 degrees Celsius, 90 degrees Fahrenheit, with a helmet like that sticking on top of my canola beta.
Well, the peloton sitting there just they're actually coming together a bit there now, so that I think they're becoming to think now of an infighting rather than chasing these four down. Still ahead, our commercial-free half hour will be brought to us by Powerbar. We'll see you in a moment. Welcome back, and we are on the lower slopes now, and already immediately the climb started to bite. Ralph Aldag is in trouble here. He is, and also so too is Breakaway. Breakaway looked to be able to handle it, but he also has been dropped now. So there are two tandems on the climb, and there's about 12 kilometers still to go up this mountain. Breakaway, the king of the mountains in the Criterium International in March, quickly unhooked by Richard Virenque. But really, it was the power riding by Paolo Bettini, but Bettini has now been forced into second place as well. The peloton are still over 8 minutes behind, and the climb for them is just about to start as well. This is the peloton, Paul, just passing through Mussy, where Bettini, Aldag, Virenque was the order over the special sprint there for the small time bonuses. And right at the back again, just about 5 men up there, we've got Stuart O'Grady. I hesitated because Paul's just written on my little pad here. The gap has come down 7 minutes 10.
7 minutes 10 seconds just on the line of the sprint there, so it's come down pretty rapidly, and we're now on the early slopes of the climb for the main peloton as well. You can see the two leaders here working very well together. It's always great to be in a breakaway situation like this with a teammate, because you're not too worried about the other man with you holding back a little in reserve with the thought of beating you in the sprint towards the end, because this is a team effort. It doesn't matter who crosses the line first, because the team will win whichever way the race goes.
This is a great result too for the Belgian team Quick-Step, managed by one of the most famous managers in Patrick Lefevre. And they rode a superb team time trial, which shocked us really. They were right up, not challenging the brilliant rides by the top teams, Armstrong's team, Postal, and of course Onthe, but they had a great ride, and now they're profiting from that, because I think they are racing to first and second place tonight in the overall classification.
Not a lot of people would have expected that on the first day, but you know, during the mountains, many of the peloton, including Lance Armstrong, crossed the Col de la Ramaz only 1 month ago, exactly on the same date, June the 12th it was, because they rode this climb in the Dauphiné Libéré. This is the yellow jersey leading the peloton on the early slopes of the climb, Victor Hugo Peña, and the early slopes of the climb, Phil, are doing damage at the back end of the main field.
Yes, just
Men
slipping
are
up.
popping off, and this is Frédéric Finot, the man who a couple of days ago was in fact the leader of the King of the Mountains competition.
Joining in there, Alessandro Bertolini of Alessio. They lost Fabio Baldato yesterday, who limped right through the Tour from that first day crash. He had really very bad knees, and also an elbow. Very unusual to see the maillot jaune of a Tour de France working like this at such an early stage. He'd expect his teammates to do the chasing, but of course he is only borrowing that jersey. That's what the Americans think as far as Lance Armstrong is concerned, because Armstrong is the man expected to take over the reins at the top as his team progress. But they've been put on the defensive today, and they've done a lot of work to try and control Richard Virenque. He is an annoying bike rider in many ways because of the way he attacks, but he's stolen the coup today. Look at the field here now. It's goodbye to a lot of riders on this climb. They'll just continue to ride in towards the finish. So it'll be nice to see who is now surviving in the senior part of the peloton.
Well, one man who is surviving is Jan Ullrich. At the back there, the red number on the shoulders of Stuart O'Grady, the most aggressive bike rider in the race, one of the longest breakaways in the race so far yesterday, caught just 550 meters to go to the line. But the front end right now is made up with all of the big leaders of the Tour de France. This is Rolf Aldag. He was in that early morning breakaway of 5 riders, which eventually ended up being 4, which has gone down to 2, and he's actually riding back to Paolo Bettini and Richard Virenque. He's a great bike rider.
He knows it all. He didn't panic with the initial acceleration by Bettini. You have an upper limit, you know it, when you've got the experience of Aldag. He didn't try to match him, but they've clearly slowed. They've gone back down to his level, and he's kept his tempo, and he's come back. And that is terrific. Well done, Rolf.
Well, the worst thing you can do on the start of a climb like that is push yourself too far into the red zone, because once you pop on a climb like that, you can never really get back into it. A lot of riders, especially the older riders, will allow the climbers to accelerate in the early kilometers, and then they know once they get into their rhythm, they can slowly but surely pull their way back. We now have a situation where we have 3 leaders of the bike race. Richard Virenque in first place here, Paolo Bettini and Rolf Aldag. And look at Virenque. Where have you come from?
Virenque took a double take there. Couldn't believe that Aldag had climbed back up to him, because now it is Virenque, the mountain goat, who is pedaling now, and he's got a fast tempo going here. The crowd know he's coming. They've been listening on radio, and they know it's their pin-up boy setting the pace. This is an amazing sight to see the maillot jaune of the Tour de France working at the head of the peloton for Lance Armstrong. The gap is coming down. It's 7 minutes and 10 seconds, last check, but that will not be enough to stop the change of race leadership tonight.
In fact,
and just look here now, the carnage at the back of the race. Some 30 riders have unhooked from the main body of the peloton as they now begin to slide out of the action. We'll take another break. There's Stuart O'Grady taking his break already. Join us soon on OLN. And welcome back to the Tour de France. You join us as Paolo Bettini has cracked. Ralph Aldag returned up to the front, and he has gone forward with Richard Virenque. And Paolo Bettini has actually gone, and I can't believe that. He looks so strong at the bottom of the climb. But Aldag recovered with his tempo and has hooked up now with Richard Virenque, this amazing German rider. Former national champion. Let's have a switch back to the main field. Latest gap we've got, well, I can't give you it, but it's about 7 minutes at the moment. Our computer's gone down. Paul, this is a very select group now. As we're looking at this, the group who are in our picture right now is a group falling behind, 20-25 riders. Now, I thought we were going to go up there and have a look at the rest of the riders. This is the face of Richard Virenque. Moments ago, we thought he was in trouble. He looked a little bit strange. He took a drink, but he's okay. But he's having real trouble now getting on to the back of Aldag. Aldag is a man inspired. He's never climbed like this in his life.
He has always been around in the big mountains, because let's not forget, over the years he's done a lot of work for men like Jan Ullrich and Bjarne Riis in the Tour de France. He's never been the great mountain goat like Richard Virenque or Paolo Bettini, but in fact he never panicked at the foot of the climb, and he started riding at a fairly steady tempo and got himself into a rhythm that was comfortable for him. But it really is impressive to see him putting a man like Richard Virenque into difficulty. Virenque is having a hard time closing that gap. They will come back together, but that will have rattled the cage of Tricky Ricky somewhat.
Well, they're saying on the computer that Bettini is complaining of being hungry, and that is why he's fallen back. Well, they call it the frangal in French. We call it the knock in the English language. It just means if you've allowed your body to get a bit low in power, which is a big mistake and a very amateurish one, you've got to keep eating little and often. You won't recover from that even if you eat for at least 20 minutes.
Well, one man who did exactly the same thing on the similar stage to this a few years ago was Lance Armstrong himself. He was in the yellow jersey on that occasion, excited by the attack of Marco Pantani on that day. He forgot to take on board food and drink on a regular basis, and he cracked towards the end, but still managed to hold on to his yellow jersey. Virenque is having to dig very deep here to pull himself back up to Rolf Aldag. He will be very surprised by this attack of the German, and now the German will try and stay in contact with Virenque. Bettini's made the serious mistake of not keeping on board food, but Virenque will going straight to the front.
Paul, I'm laughing because at the finishing line here, the crowd are watching this on a big screen, and there's been a huge cheer and a round of applause when Richard Virenque went through on the inside of Aldag.
Well, they love him here. Whatever he's done in the past, he's never lost his popularity with the French crowd. They regard him as being the great animator of the Tour de France. Armstrong is just sitting at the front end of the main field, but the leader of the bike race, Victor Hugo Peña, is in difficulty on the early slopes. It's not surprising. It's been a lot of pressure for him. He's had the yellow jersey on his shoulders. He's enjoyed it. He's riding back into the group with Lance Armstrong, but his hopes of staying in yellow tonight are disappearing.
He's had to do his work for Armstrong, and he's still come back. Even so, he's got Flecker of Ibernesto just in front of him. There he is, a very good climber. There is Salvatore Camesso, former twice champion of Italy, yes. And also alongside here is Christophe Auriol, who's not a bad climber himself. And number 69 here, that'll be Moncoutier, I think.
69 is Cedric Vasseur. This is a group of riders who've been dropped off the back of the main peloton, so I would have to tell you one thing: Victor Hugo Peña will not be seeing the front end of the bike race again. We expect to see Tyler Hamilton still in the front group with Lance Armstrong. It will be interesting to see how the man who's riding with a double fracture of the clavicle handled the first mountain passes. His teammates are in front. That was Nicolas Jalabert just disappearing from the screen. He's in CSC as well. This is Laszlo Budrogi, the man who was on the attack a couple of days ago.
Loudon is here. He fell off earlier on. Now, I think the fact that they are both here, we should pan up to Tyler Hamilton, and that's what I'm hoping at the moment. Well, I don't think we are. It looks as though Tyler is not here.
I think Hamilton is probably in the front group. This is one of the groups that have been dropped on the road right now. That is the front group who are chasing the Breakaway, who started the attacks after 50 kilometers of racing. The race situation on the road right now is Virenque and Aldag are together, and around about 1 minute behind them is Paolo Bettini. But this is the group of Lance Armstrong with all of his teammates. He wears number 1 there in 3rd position. Looking a bit further down, there is David Miller, 61. 131 in the blue jersey is Jan Ulrich. The big names are all here. The big powerhouse from Charlotte, North Carolina there is Georgie Hincapie. But Armstrong's faceful, look at that. Concentration, unbelievable.
He's waiting for the attacks. Other than that, if they don't come, he's going to keep this pressure on at the moment and hope he can close down a little bit on the leaders. And I have to say, he's left himself a lot to do today. He might have to be content with handing the yellow jersey to someone else today. It might well be Richard Virenque, the new man in yellow. That's the way it's looking at the moment. Stay with us live. Don't forget, our commercial-free half hour is coming up shortly here on OLM. Well, what a race this is turning out to be now. A man no expert would have given you is on the front with Richard Virenque. His name, Ralph Aldag. Side by side, they are climbing now about 4.25 miles from the summit. The latest gap on Lance Armstrong, which is at the head of the peloton, including David Miller, 5 minutes 30 seconds. The workhorse at the bottom, George Hincapie for US Postal. He has done all he can do. He's now just going to have to finish the day.
Great work by these men of Lance Armstrong. They've set the pace over the flat part of this course today, riding along at an average speed of 42 kilometers an hour. But right now, job done. They're out of the picture. They must just survive, get over this mountain, and go out and do exactly the same thing again tomorrow. This is what Armstrong has done right now, though. He's built himself a team of very good climbers to stay with him on these mountain passes. You can be sure that those blue jerseys were Heras Beltran and Chechu Rubiera. The two leaders, though, Phil, right now are starting to lose some pretty serious time, because it's now gone down to 5.5 minutes, but 1 minute lead over Paolo Bettini, who seems to have recovered somewhat. There is the Devil. He's got his 100th year trident to celebrate the anniversary of the Tour.
Yes, and he doesn't look 100 years old, but that's why he's the Devil as he runs alongside the two leaders. And it will be a special shout there for the German Ralph Aldag, because in fact our friend the Devil is indeed a German. Back to the peloton now, round Jan Ulrich, his face set on the far left. Lance Armstrong here, riding with all of the power we think he possesses. He's moving to the front again now, and watch the little scurry of riders behind now as they've seen Armstrong go to the front. He's still got, though, the big climbers with him. Little Roberto Heras is the small rider here, looking cool. He's got the much bigger frame there of Jan Ulrich towering over him. This is a very select bunch now, but there's still a lot of them. And there's an attack from the pack. That's Vinokurov. Alexander Vinokurov has gone. Well, that is a cheeky move, and it's going to cause a reaction surely from Armstrong.
Well, Telecom said they wanted to do this. They've got a couple of prongs, you know. They've got man like Vinokurov. They've got Santiago Botero in arrears to wait and try and attack later on. But this was a very good attack. This was no test for the waters at the moment, because this attack is trying to open up time over Lance Armstrong. Alexander Vinokurov has had a brilliant season so far. He won Paris-Nice in the early part of the season, but more recently he won the race Tour of Switzerland. And look at that. He's 42nd overall at the start of the day, a minute 49 behind, but there's been no response from Lance Armstrong's men.
Well, you know, we've always talked about Lance Armstrong winning. We are not alone. The whole world is accepting the fact that Armstrong is the best. But the riders simply will not accept that. And they've made it quite clear. This is Laurent Brochard, surprisingly, in the cars behind, because I thought he'd have still been in that front group. But they have said they will attack Lance. And the big worry that Lance has is that the attacks come from a number of different teams, because they might well combine. And I think that's his biggest threat against a fifth victory. Now we've got Virenque up the road, looking to be yellow tonight. Vinokurov has made his move now.
The only thing that he can do is make sure that he doesn't panic. He can allow attacks of single riders to go clear off the front, but when it does become dangerous is if there's an attack by Vinokurov, Gilberto Simoni and Jan Ulrich, and then they get together and combine their forces. The race situation at the moment, Aldag has finally cracked. That's such a shame. We're 5 kilometers to the summit, and Virenque kicks deep now. He knows he's got the possibility of a stage victory. He's losing time on Armstrong, because the group of Armstrong is 5 minutes and 15 seconds behind, but Richard Virenque has dug deep right now, and he's put time gap between himself and the German for the first time.
It had to happen. There was no way in the world that Aldag could keep control of this great climber forever. But we're looking now at the riders riding behind Vinokurov, who hasn't gone that far ahead since he made his initial acceleration. He's just around the corner. Now, I'm not too sure, but that's not David Echeverria up there as he tries to go clear.
Well,
he was an early attacker. It looks like him, doesn't it?
It looks like Echeverria, who's gone off the front. It's very difficult from this altitude. We're looking at around about 1,000 feet above the main breakaway there. But Vinokurov certainly has gone off the front of the Lance Armstrong group. That initial acceleration was superb. He's got himself a lead of around about 200 meters. Armstrong is still surrounded by a group of very talented climbers. He will not panic. He'll allow his climbers now to do the pacemaking and slowly but surely try and work their way up to this man wearing number 28, Alexander Vinokurov. 42nd overall at the start of the day, over a minute 40 back on Lance Armstrong, but now the man leading the bike race, finally doing what he does best, putting on an incredible show in the mountains. Richard Virenque is now leading this stage of the Tour de France. A quick drink coming on board there from Wilfred Peters, the team manager. Wilfred probably enjoying being at the front in the mountains, because as a bike rider he wasn't very often there.
No, he would be way behind. He wasn't a climber. He was a very good one-day rider though, but this wasn't his forte. Now he's getting to see the Tour de France from a car, and he sees what it's like when the big riders go. And Richard Virenque, one of the biggest mountain climbers currently in the Tour de France. This looks to me as though we've got off the back of the group here. Now I'm very surprised to see this, Paul. Bolocki going backwards, Simoni going backwards. I'm really surprised about this.
Very surprising. You look at that, he's got an awful lot of mucus on his lip as well there. This man had played a big game up until now. He's the winner this year of the Giro d'Italia, but there's a big difference between the Giro and the Tour. He's had to suffer today in the heat, and he's not enjoying his first taste of the big Alpine passes. He is going backwards from the group of Lance Armstrong. This is the first surprise coming from a man who'd said he was going to chip away at Lance Armstrong in the mountains and blow away his foundations.
It may have been the wrong day for Seiko to wear black and white, because there could be a morning for that man, the way he's dropping away from the action so early. He was very upset with the poor team time trial. He's going into the mountains more than 3 minutes back, and now he's losing real time. The peloton are closing in on Richard Virenque. They're giving us now just on 4.5 minutes, so he's far from safe. They've got to get it inside 2 minutes to stop him taking the race lead overall. He is really suffering at this point, because this climb gets steeper towards the summit, and for that very same reason, that peloton behind, already small, is going to get smaller.
These riders are able to judge this to perfection, this mountain pass. Many of them who rode it exactly 1 month ago. On June the 12th, they went over the Col de la Ramaz And on that instance, it was Iban Mayo of Euskaltel Euskadi who got the victory ahead of Lance Armstrong and Francisco Mancebo. For the moment, this man is leading. He's led the race since about the 50th kilometre when he joined the breakaway with his teammate Paolo Bettini. But right now, he is losing big chunks of time. At the start of the climb, he had around about an 8-minute advantage. And after half of the climb, he's lost most of that. And the last time check we got was 4 minutes and 30 seconds, with Vinokurov, Phil, only being 10 seconds in front of the climbing armada of Lance Armstrong.
Well, this was US Postal's plan at the end of the day, to use their strong climbers on this big climb. The others were pacemakers. Oh dear,
Botero is in difficulty now.
Santiago Botero. Nobody quite knew what his form was like. He's been racing in South America this season. Well, there's the answer for you. He's not going to climb very well, at least on day one of this year's tour.
It's also on the far side, the Bianchi rider is Angel Casero. He was supposed to be one of the men going to look after his own leader, Jan Ulrich, in the big mountains. The first day in the mountains, as I said earlier in the day, Phil, is always very strange for the legs. You've ridden on huge gears on the flat roads, pedaling along at 45, 46 kilometers an hour. But then once you hit the mountains for the first time, it's a completely different pedaling action. There is Alexander Vinokurov. He's not much more than 30 meters in front of Lance Armstrong's men. They have not panicked. They left him out there to fry, and they slowly but surely brought him back.
Yes, they're going to pick him up. Situation on the road at the moment. Richard Virenque, here he is, getting ever closer to the top, leading his teammate Paolo Bettini by just over a minute. And then comes Alexander Vinokurov, who's just ahead of that main field. About a 4-minute spread over the important riders now in the Tour de France. One or two big names already dropping off the pace. But the French crowd here, those that are French, are cheering on their idol, Richard Virenque. He is going at the limit of his race today. He's out for the win, and he may dream of a yellow jersey. As we're watching Bettini now struggling all the time. He's coming up behind Aldag. Bettini dropped, remember, when Aldag rejoined, the pair of them at the front. And now it looks as though Aldag is taking his turn to hit the wall.
Well, when you pop on a climb like this, it is so very difficult to get yourself back into the bike race. And that is Paolo Bettini. In fact, he was caught and passed there by Vinokurov. He's back in the main field. Look at Ulrich, though, Phil, in about 4th position. He was looking very comfortable indeed. Not a problem for him. Iban Mayo in the orange jersey is there. So is Tyler Hamilton of CSC Tiscali. That is remarkable to see a man who we didn't believe would start stage number 2. He's battled through the flat stages, battled through the team time trial, and now he's at the front of the bike race in the Tour de France with a double fracture of the clavicule.
Well, if he gets through these this weekend, then I think Tyler Hamilton will ride to Paris. I really do. And that would be a remarkable achievement. Virenque here just taking on all the fluid he can find as the group slowly gets pulled back in here now. Every rider here at the back of the race as well is struggling now. This climb is hurting them today. We're just watching now the riders here as they drop off the back of the field. Remember that this commercial-free half hour is being brought to you by Powerbar, the official sponsor, the 2003 Tour de France, and the fuel of Lance. Be great. 25 kilometers to go now, and that's still a lot of racing to be done. One small climb still to come, plus the downhill to Morzine. Richard Virenque is still heading the charge. You'll never fault this man for effort, that's for sure. He's prepared now to ride to his limit, to hold that field off. Much fluid, as much food as they can get down him. He doesn't want to go the way of Bettini, and he's going to keep pumping it in now, but the gap is still a big one.
Still a very big gap, and if he can get to the summit with about 2 minutes advantage over the main field, he's got a very good chance of surviving, because Richard Virenque can go downhill with the best of them in the world of professional cycling. That is the group of Lance Armstrong. It's a very small group right now, down to around about 40 men, but the men in that group will be the serious contenders for overall victory at the Tour de France. We've already had a revelation that Santiago Botero is not at the top of his form, and he really has just blown apart on the slopes of this climb here right now, Phil. And I think the secretness in his preparation was obviously because he just was not going well.
But the great news for British viewers as well, Paul, David Miller, the only British cyclist in the event, is still in this group and riding well. It's a very small select group, this. I think there's still more attacks to come from it, of course, as we now see Abandonments down there in the orange jersey as well. And Didier Roos, the champion of France, off to the left of our picture. And Belocchi is here, but Simone has gone off the back of this group. US Postal still have 4 riders here. Remember that the maillot jaune, the leader, has gone. The post is vacant. We're looking for a new leader.
Looking for a new leader. The man who is the leader on the road at the moment is Richard Virenque, but he's losing big chunks of his time here. It's not surprising to see, Phil, the way US Postal reacted today. They know this course. In fact, 137 kilometers of today's stage is exactly the same as the stage of the Dauphiné Libéré, which these riders rode 1 month ago on the 12th of June. Armstrong on the right-hand side there. I think his tactic at the start of the day was to look and see if there would be any reaction for the people who were hoping to challenge him. There has been no reaction so far, and we're now setting ourselves up for a big showdown tomorrow on the slopes of the Alpe d'Huez. Tactically, US Postal have been very good as Paolo Bettini disappears from the main group. US Postal used their strong riders on the flatter part of the course. Men like Yekimov, men like Hincapie, Landis and Padrinos. But once they switched across to the big mountain passes, they've got a team of superb climbers to look after Armstrong.
Well, indications there about Bettini. He needs another drink. He's now going to have to struggle. He's dropping away from the action at the moment. We know the riders in this front group include Armstrong, Heras, Beltran, Belocchi is there. Surprisingly, and we saw the white jersey, Eric Zabel is there. Christophe Morzine, Christophe Moreau, 2 top Frenchmen. Poivet is still hanging on after early breakaway, and Jan Ulrich. Those riders are amongst the riders in that group. We've seen David Miller there as well. The big surprise is Eric Zabel, Paul.
I wonder if that's not a bit of false information.
No, I've seen
I'd be very surprised to see Zabel still in this group, especially after that.
Unless they're confusing his jersey with possibly the Austrian champion.
That's quite possible on a day like this.
Possible, yeah.
A lot of this information coming from about 200 feet above the bike race. Let's not forget it is so very difficult on these mountains to get exact communications all of the time. One thing that is certain, though, is Lance Armstrong is in this group. So is Tyler Hamilton. Jan Ulrich is there as well, and so is Yoshiba Belocchi. Belocchi there moving up towards the tail end of Lance Armstrong, looking very good and comfortable. And also Abandonments, the Euskaltel-Euskadi rider. There is not going to be a showdown this afternoon. It was basically, as we expected, the first taste of the mountains, but it's going to be a big, tough race tomorrow.
Well, I think there might be a little bit of a concern here from US Postal having to react to an attack by Richard Virenque. The others will let them do all of the pacemaking, even the big climbers. They will expect them to use their energy. They won't help them because they'll try to attack them tomorrow on the road to Alpe d'Huez. See if we can pan down and pick out 1 or 2 riders for you now. US Postal have got 4 men up here. The gap is coming down ever so slowly from 4:15 now to 4 minutes 10 seconds. This is the face of Richard Virenque, the man who has conquered the mountain since 1994. He won at Luzardi-Den. We're going there shortly. He won at Cotteret in the next door valley. Here in the Alps, he won at Courchevel. He's won at Morzine, and he's won in the Giant de Provence Mont Ventoux. He is a brilliant climber, and he's been in this situation before many times on his own.
I tell you what, Phil, he's inside the last kilometre right now, and we know he's been a bad boy in cycling, but you cannot take away from the fact that this man's heart is full of absolute courage. To do this on the first big mountain stage is quite remarkable. He's not worried at all about what's going to happen in the rest of the Tour. He knows he's not going to win the Tour de France this year, but he wanted to show himself off to the French crowd, and he will get himself an awful lot of points in the King of the Mountains competition as well. With a bit of luck, he might just snatch the yellow jersey for one day, but I think US Postal Service here have got it in the complete control.
Well, the big men who really should have attacked them, like Belocchi, like Jan Ulrich, we can't say Simone anymore because he's gone off even on the tempo riding. But they've stayed behind and have chosen not to make the move. David Miller is there, 61, riding just in front of one of his teammates there, and I think it is his mate too, David Moncoutier, number 66. They are the 2 top climbers on that French Cofidis team. Cheers all the way up now, this final 1,000 metres to the summit of the Col de la Ramez, and it's not all over today when he's over the top, and he knows that. He has another 3rd category climb before he will finally turn onto the valley approach to the town of Morzine in the Alps. 55 seconds is the lead, only back to the next man, and it should be still, I suppose, Aldag.
Still Rolf Aldag, and a lot of people wondering why Armstrong didn't want to go out and lay the law down on the first day in the mountains, as he so often has done in the past. Well, I reckon it's probably because of the fact that this big climb we're going over right now, the Col de la Ramaz, is actually at 22 kilometers to the finish. Now, he could have attacked on this climb and put time between himself and his rivals, but with 22 kilometers downhill to the finish, they would have a huge chance of recovering and pulling them back, and he would therefore have wasted his effort. The big attack on the slopes of the Alpe d'Huez, though, is there's no chance to recuperate. There's no chance to come back by taking risks on the descent. Richard Virenque now is not very far from the summit of this climb. He still conserves around about 4 minutes of his advantage, but he's hurting right now.
And I'm not surprised. He's trying desperately. He's not thinking now of just winning the King of the Mountains. He's won that title 5 times before. He is thinking of winning this stage and taking the yellow jersey. And to a Frenchman in the 100th year of the Tour de France, that will make him a superstar. And they didn't deserve such success because they had a French leader earlier in the week. He was the first French leader for 2 years, Jean-Patrick Nazon. But this man is now preparing for a descent, and then he'll look towards the finish. He's over the top of the first big climb of this year's Tour. He takes maximum points. Huge round of applause down here in Morzine for him. They're going to cheer him all the way now.
Well, one thing's for certain, whatever happens to Richard Virenque right now over the next 22 kilometers, he will be the king of the mountains at the end of today's stage. He will take incredible risks on this descent right now and try to conserve as much of his advantage as possible as we look at the main field here, still controlled by the climbers of Lance Armstrong's team. Chechu Rubiera is the man in first position here, doing a great job of work. Manuel Beltran, who they signed only 1 month before the Tour de France, is in second, and still there is their man. That is Roberto Heras. At the back there, wearing 161, by the way, is Stefano Garzelli. He's not made too much noise in the Tour de France this year, but he's still in with the action.
And so's your Yaks there from Once. I'm beginning to eat my words. I said he would fall away from the leaderboard today. He was up there in 10th place overall, and he's still in this front group, along with his team captain, Joshiba Bolocki. Well, guess who these people are supporting here with a polka dot jersey on? They're supporting, of course, Richard Virenque. But coming up the climb now, magnificent place here for Aldag. Now, once the climb is over, Ralph Aldag will come into his own again.
Well, he's a great bike handler. We've seen him win sprints. We've seen him ride well in the mountains at the Tour de France over the years, but he certainly can go downhill very fast. He'll have a tall order, though, to try and bridge a 1 minute gap to Richard Virenque, because Virenque, for a climber, is an excellent descender as well, and he will be going around those corners as if there is absolutely no tomorrow. He starts the climb, the descent I should say, with an advantage of 4 minutes over the main field, and I don't think he will lose very much of that on the descent. There's Moreau moving up onto the shoulder of Lance Armstrong. These men are all moving up in the overall classification. It will be a completely different classification tonight.
Well, this very select forward group is closing in quickly on Aldag. I think he's gone over the top with the lead of 1:32. David Miller, just hang on, David, because it's nearly all over. Just rocking a little bit at the back in our picture there, David Miller. But if he gets over the top, and it's not too far now, he'll be okay. This is the pacemaking, and it's an interminable pace now by the riders on the Spanish membership of US Postal team. This is Rubiera, who's setting the pace at the front as the right-hand man of Lance here in the mountains. Rubiera himself saying they'd have 2 or 3 men up alongside Lance on the climbs today. Well, he's proved to be absolutely correct. And the yellow jersey, Pena, has gone, but Armstrong is still here.
But look at this tactic of US Postal. They're using these 2 climbers here, Rubiera and Beltran. They seem to be keeping in reserve Roberto Heras for something special later on. There is the jersey I think they confused Eric Zabel with there, because that's the jersey of the national champion of Austria. That's Georg Tocznik, and I have a funny feeling that in fact that jersey there is the jersey of the man who was well up in the overall classification of the Giro d'Italia earlier this season.
I think you're right, Paul, and he's still in that group, and that's a much more likely candidate, because Georg Tocznik is a very, very good climber. Still counting down, remember, we've got the leader over the top, Virenque. Ralph Aldag is at 1:32. It looks as though the peloton could still be running around at 4 minutes. 3:20 is the third rider over the top here. Looks like Breakaway again, who's gone over the top. He's done well to survive, but he's gone over the top in third place. Tyler Hamilton is in that group.
Still surviving. It's amazing to think what this man has gone through. There you can see the pink jersey, Yoshiba Balocki. Ulrich still looking very calm and collected. An acceleration coming here from Ibanesto.com, but they won't react at all. Armstrong just stretching his neck there. The pain of sitting in that position for 4.5 hours in the saddle, and they're not too far behind. There's Iban Mayo, and the move now has come from Ibanesto.com for the descent.
I think that was actually Mancebo, the team leader there of Ibanesto, who just made a point coming out of the top. Now, the skill of the descenders now as they start the descent, and you know, just under 4 minutes now for Armstrong's group. They've got to pull back 2 minutes at least to stop Richard Virenque taking the leader's yellow jersey. Still a tough call indeed, and if it all comes right, we could still have Lance Armstrong in yellow tonight.
Well, they've got to pull it back down to inside of 2 minutes if they want to make sure that Lance Armstrong gets the yellow jersey at the end of today. This is Virenque. He's taking these corners quite precariously at the moment. He will go down into those corners and brake at the very last moment. The time gap, by the way, between Richard Virenque and Rolf Aldag was 1 minute and 30 seconds. It will be very difficult for the German to actually nail back that time deficit on a descent like this, because Virenque is going exceptionally fast here. He's touching speeds in the straight, approaching around about 60 miles an hour. Then in the corners, he'll slow down to about 40 and then try and accelerate once again. It's a fairly technical descent as well here, with lots of braking and accelerating. And you have to make sure that you remember to knock back down the gears a little bit, because you need to be in a slightly lower gear to accelerate once again you've come out of the corner and then up to 100 kilometers an hour.
Virenque is a good descender though, and he's braking nicely for the line for that left-hander. Going back here to life on the mountain. 5.25 minutes, 5.5 minutes has gone by. Christophe Mangin. It's been a very difficult descent for many of them here. But we'll keep an eye out for Gilberto Simoni, see if we can pick him up. He's not in this group, that's for sure. 5:40 now. This is a very select group with only 5 minutes, but there's an awful lot of riders a lot further back than that.
A lot of riders, Phil, today will be very worried about the elimination time, and the average speed of the stage so far is about 36 kilometers an hour, and the average cutoff will be 16% of that time, and that gives the riders around about an hour to finish. And it's always a big advantage on stages like this, the long stages, because the elimination time stretches out. It's on the shorter mountain stages where it is a lot more dangerous.
Well, while riders at the back worry about the cut-off time, these riders are still well in the situation at the front here as they continue to climb. Vladimir Karpitz, the white jersey, coming through our picture at the moment. One of the youngest riders in the race. They're 3 on 23 years of age. But they are keeping things nicely together and riding sensibly here. 6 minutes and 40 seconds.
Well, I didn't get a glimpse at all of Gilberto Simoni. I can't believe he's lost this amount of time on a climb. He may well have been just off the back of the Lance Armstrong group. Still, Richard Virenque is charging down into the finish line here, still possessing a 1:30 advantage over Rolf Aldag, and it's now down to 3 minutes and 53 seconds back to the Lance Armstrong group. So the situation at the moment is Richard Virenque is still the leader of the Tour de France, and of course we'll note at the end of today that he'll be the leader in the King of the Mountains competition as well.
Well, his break has been all worthwhile really, and there's still a real chance he'll have yellow. He's a great descender through the S's here now, because the roads in this part of the world are very tortuous when you're in the narrow stretches of road. But the race might well reorganize here at the back. Still no help coming from the peloton. Those who will follow the tempo of US Postal are going to sit there and watch them sell themselves, use their energy, and hope that they can then hit them again tomorrow. Didier Roux sitting up in that blue top to his French jersey, having a look who is coming back into the group. Balocki is certainly here. Jörg Jatsk is also here. Tyler Hamilton is in that group. Not too sure about David Miller. He did lose contact on the way up. He's going to have to chase back.
Well, Miller will make a big recovery on the descent. He didn't lose very much more than 20 or 30 seconds in the last kilometre of that climb. But right now, US Postal, Phil, do not need to panic about the position of Richard Virenque. It doesn't really matter in the big picture of the Tour de France if Richard Virenque conserves enough time to take the yellow jersey, because after a long escapade like this on a stage which is 230 kilometres in length, he will be in serious difficulty tomorrow on the slopes up to the summit of the Alpe d'Huez. And even if he does get the yellow jersey for a day, I think he would only be borrowing it.
All right, we'll see. Don't forget, you said Bettini was going to win.
Well, I had a feeling Bettini would stay up there because let's not forget he made an amateurish mistake of not keeping himself topped up with fuel. And I do think right now that there's a very serious chance that Richard Virenque could hold on to the advantage that he's got, get the yellow jersey, but I can't believe that he would stay in contact with Lance Armstrong tomorrow on the slopes of the Alpe d'Huez.
Now we've crossed off the mountains now. We're heading down towards that valley road to Ligier and then on forward to Morzine and the finish. So we're looking at Richard Virenque now is riding flat out for the finish. One little hill, that will stop him. We hope you've enjoyed the commercial-free half hour being brought to you by Powerbar, the official sponsor of the 2003 Tour de France. We're now looking here at the peloton reorganizing themselves, trying now to catch up with Richard Virenque. They may, for the first time this year, misjudged the chase. Well, the rocking and rolling of the shoulders, he's committed 110%, this man now. All he wants is the victory. The yellow jersey would be a bonus. We think he's done enough to take the lead in the King of the Mountains. It's been a very profitable day for Richard Virenque, a rider now riding his 11th Tour de France. The one he would never want to be reminded of is 1998, when the whole team, Festina, were thrown out for admitting to a drug testing program. But he's proving that without the use of illegal stimulants, he is just about the same bike rider.
Well, he's on the climb now of Ligier, which is a 4-kilometer climb. And at around about 15 kilometers, this man was being chased by the main field by the deficit of 3 minutes and 50 seconds. On the front of the main field, it's still US Postal Service. There's Tyler Hamilton on the left-hand side. But it's interesting to see the lime green jersey there for the first time this year at the Tour de France of Stefano Garzelli. We haven't even talked about him for a week.
We haven't seen him, that's why, Paul, but he's just watching and waiting. He's waiting for the pressure to go off him, hide in the peloton, not make any mistakes. All of a sudden, he will be there. He often rides that way. There are 33 riders in this chase group, which we're calling the Group Armstrong at the moment, and just a couple of guys ahead, Poilvet and Aldag. In front. They're under 20 kilometers to go to the finish now. Well, there's no faulting the work rate of US Postal. They have done extremely well today.
They've done extremely well. They look very strong indeed. Tactically, they've ridden a perfect race, but they've actually shut off the chase right now, and race radio is coming across to let me know that, in fact, the leader, Richard Virenque, is in front by 4 minutes and 30 seconds. He's extending his advantage. These guys are actually going to let him take the yellow jersey today, and I think that the responsibility of all of the work tomorrow will go over to the quick-step David de Montine.
Well, such are the tactics. So you get rid of the pressure for a day and then try and attack from the back, I guess. This is Richard Virenque. The good news will reach him. Aldag, unable to get back on terms with Virenque after the climb. He lost a little bit too much on the way up. Looks like a grimace, partly a smile, as he keeps on tapping out the pedals as we get towards the last little climb of the day at Ligier. And then it's a race down the valley. He's on the main road into Morzine now. No turn either way. This has been a good opening day in the Alps. I hope you agree. There's plenty more to come. We'll just take a break now here on OLN. Rejoin us very soon. And welcome back to the Tour de France today. The stragglers are still coming atop of the Col de la Ramez at the 208-kilometer point today of this massive stage of 230. But Richard Virenque is almost home. He has gone through 10 kilometers to go. Just trying to see if we can pick out anybody of note, but I don't think, looking down here, Paul, we're going to see any big names now. It's a long time since Virenque crossed over.
Virenque has crossed this line about 20 minutes ago. The back of the group there is Salvatore Commesso, the former Italian national champion. But the way the race is running out right now, Richard Virenque is the man leading this bike race. He leads Rolf Aldag by 1 minute and 30 seconds. And then it's the group of Lance Armstrong, 4 minutes and 46 seconds in arrears. Richard Virenque now is not too far away from the summit of this final climb of the day, a little climb called Ligier. It's a third category climb. He's building himself up a huge margin in the King of the Mountains competition, but at the end of today, he will get himself the yellow jersey. He wore the yellow jersey in his first Tour de France, if you remember, when he came to this event as a youngster back in 1992, riding for the RMO team. and since then he's been in love with this event, and once or twice he's crossed over the path trying to make sure that he could win the Tour de France, and in fact even delved into the darker side of the sport on 1 or 2 occasions.
Well, he's dancing his way to victory now. He's got a huge flotilla of vehicles behind him. 5 wins already, number 6 is on the way. He's been a winner in Morzine before. In the year 2000, he was also in solitary fashion then when he rode on the Italian team Polti. But now he's riding for the Belgian team Quick-Step. But he is such a popular figure in France. The motorcyclists there getting a little bit too close here, but then he is French and they do want to capture the images for the papers tomorrow, as he now climbs up round at Ligier before he heads down to the finish in Morzine itself.
Well, there's the summit of the 3rd category climb. He'll get some points there, but very shortly what's more important for him, Phil, is he will get the descent down into the finish. The last time check we got back to the group containing Lance Armstrong was 4 minutes and 46 seconds. As we look at the gruppetto coming to the summit of the climb, these men are just hoping to survive today. They want to stay inside the time limit, which on a day like today should be around about the 1 hour mark. There's Stuart O'Grady on the far side, Pavel Padrinos also in the group there just at the back, Yaroslav Ekimov. They've done their job for the day. They're just conserving energy, because tomorrow they will have to come out and play once again to try and get Lance Armstrong into the yellow jersey, because he will not have it at the end of today's stage.
Baden Cook also in there, and Baden Cook, the new wearer of the green jersey of the race lead on points after the retirement early today. There's the yellow jersey of Victor Hugo Pennu as well. He's fallen right back. And so he's done for the day as well. He'll lose that jersey, of course, today. But also Baden Cook will pull on the green. That'll be the first time ever for him. And he'll be only the 3rd Australian to achieve that. But meanwhile, we are racing off towards the finish in Morzine now. This is Ligier. As we course through the streets now, Richard Virenque is heading to victory. A familiar role for him in Morzine. He won here in 2000. The tempo still being set by US Postal, nobody willing to help them as they gradually go further ahead. 4 minutes 25 now for Richard Virenque. He is the new yellow jersey of the Tour de France. And don't forget, the town of Ligier is 5 miles or 8 kilometers from the finishing line. And that, by the way, is the venue for the Mountain Bike World Championships next year. Couldn't think of a prettier place to hold it.
Absolutely remarkable backdrop for any kind of sporting event. The town of Ligier and also the town of Morzine, which towers above it, is the ski station of Avoriaz. On the descent right now down towards the finish line is Richard Virenque. The last time check he had was 4 minutes and 25 seconds, but he is on the descent down into the finishing straight right now, and they are not going to pull back very much more of that 4 minutes 25 seconds he started the ascent with.
Well, this has been a marvellous display by Richard Virenque. There's no way you can take this away for the man. It's been superb. This is the principal group with David Moncoutier tagged onto the tail. We'd like to see David Miller in here, but we think he's still dangling just a little bit. Oh, is that Miller on the left? I think he might be there. Very, very close. We'll have to wait and see as we're looking down on the 33 riders here. This is the 11th Tour de France for Richard Virenque. In his very first tour in 1992, he did hold briefly the yellow jersey, and that was the occasion we said, who on earth is this man? We hadn't heard of him, and he's never worn it since until this year.
He's charging down into town right now. He's got a slight right-hand turn as he gets into the outskirts of Morzine. He'll have to ride around on the flat, drop down into the bottom part of the town square, and then drag his body up the last kilometre to the finishing straight, but he should not lose very much time at all. I think, you know, Phil, US Postal Service have made a pretty sensible tactic, because let's not forget, the Tour de France is not being won or lost on this stage this afternoon. It's just being played out. It's a 3-week bike race. It's important to ride well on every individual stage. I think today Richard Virenque is shining for the first time, but he will pay for this effort over the next few days.
Well, I think tomorrow will give us the answer to that, Paul, but for today it's going to be Virenque, I think. This is the chase behind. A little bit of reaction here behind at the moment, because this is a big move by iBernesto.com. A late attack to steal seconds away from Armstrong, perhaps. This is a strong move as they climb the last climb of the day at Les Gets. More likely to be going, I think, just for the points at the top of the climb, which this is the leader of iBernesto, Francisco Mancebo, as he comes up over the top. and well marked by Lance Armstrong. They're not going to slip away today. They're keeping an eye now. Lance has had enough of people jumping away. Only this man is going to have the glory of having beaten Lance Armstrong today, and he did it in his usual fashion by breaking away early on and hanging on to the end. He's on his way to the finish. We will take a short break, but we'll be back and go home to the line with Richard Virenque, probably the new leader of the Tour. We'll be back. And we're back on OLN with the closing 2.5 kilometres of today's stage of the Tour de France. Richard Virenque for France is racing for yellow in the Centennial Tour, and he'll be the second Frenchman to do it since this tour began. The organisers won't believe it, but this has been a ride of absolute quality. Crossing the gap virtually alone to the leaders, he sent them all packing one by one on the climb of the Col de la Ramez. Now he's in the streets of Morzine, and his lead is enough to give him yellow. It's a marvellous piece of exhibition riding by Richard Virenque. It will be his 6th win. The last win is always the best. These roundabouts now will take him down. There's a little loop around the town, in fact. He'll go off down the Gorge Road in effect before he swings down and then up towards the finishing line. The crowd is ready. There won't be many people this far out though, because we're on the other side of the valley here. But Richard Virenque now knows this is his. 1 kilometre to go, and this is going to feel a marvellous moment for Richard Virenque. He won in Morzine in 2000. You might hear the public applauding outside of our commentary box. This is a great victory for him. Then the clock will tell us, Paul, if he's got yellow.
Well, he's got yellow, Phil. There's no problem at all about that, because at 5 kilometres to go, the group containing Lance Armstrong and all of the other favourites in the Tour de France were still 4 minutes behind. He's gone round those corners in an absolutely ballistic manner. He's inside the area now where he can see the meters ticking by. He's been up this finishing straight before, and he's just going to give it everything, but he will enjoy this victory. He won't salute until the final minute, because he knows he needs every second possible.
The crowd are cheering along the barriers all the way. The moment every Frenchman dreams of, very few have it. He'll be only the 82nd Frenchman ever to pull on the maillot jaune. As he races up towards the line now, he looks at the crowd, he gives them a smile, he gives them a grit of his teeth. He's still looking for that banner. When is he going to come? This is rather a nasty little hill up to the line, the way they come in these days. It wasn't the way he came in when he won in the year 2000. Now's the moment. Almost exactly the same salute he gave when he arrived here in 2000. Richard Virenque takes stage 7 of the Tour de France. The clock starts now, and he is looking for yellow.
This is Sylvain Chavanel. He's just jumped away from the group of Lance Armstrong, trying to get himself a little bit of last-minute glory, but in the main field behind, they're not too worried about Sylvain Chavanel. They've lost themselves an awful lot of time on a certain Frenchman by the name of Richard Virenque. Still in the middle of nowhere. Let's not forget the man who's going to cross the line in second place is Rolf Aldag. He's about 2.5 minutes behind, but it's an emotional finish here for this man, Richard Virenque. He's come back to the top of the sport. He's put in an unbelievable escapade today. He's garnered everything he wanted to get, but most importantly, he's got himself the yellow jersey.
It's a huge success for the Quick Step team, a team from Belgium, and they'll be as happy as if he were from Belgium as a national. This rider is still speeding away from the peloton, and he's seen as one of the stars of the future, Sylvain Chavanel. He's a young man, and they're looking to this man one day to possibly win the Tour de France. He's shown us he's got the aggression that might one day count and make the difference.
Well, he's a great bike rider. He showed us in Paris-Nice in the early part of the season that he wasn't scared of going out on the attack. He's coming inside of 2 kilometers to go right now as well. This is the main field, still led by Lance Armstrong's climbers. They're setting a tempo. In fact, they're still losing a bit of time, because at the last time check it was 4 minutes and 5 seconds. Tomorrow we're going to have a huge day on the slopes of the Alpe d'Huez, but all of the big names in the Tour de France, Phil, are in this group, except of course for Gilberto Simoni and Santiago Botero, have been blown away completely.
Well, as always, the overall result tonight will make interesting reading to see who gained, who lost, what they will plan to do tomorrow on the biggie, the climb of Alpe d'Huez to the summit, and that, I'm sure, is where Lance Armstrong will aim to put matters to rights. He will expect Virenque to have used far too much energy today. We don't know his final overall lead yet, but I reckon about 2.5. Here, for me, has been one of the heroes of the day. If ever you're a cyclist at this level, you suffer like Aldag has suffered, you are left behind, you go back to the man, you are left behind again, you hang on. This has got to be his finest ride in the Tour de France.
This man is a true professional right now. He'd hoped to try and stay in contact with Richard Virenque. He loses 2.5 minutes after 6 hours in the saddle, but this is one of the stages he can write home about. I think Benoit Poivel, the man from Crédit Agricole, Phil, has been brought back into the fold, and third man out on the road is Sylvain Chavanel of Brioche-la-Boulangère. The main field are not too far behind, only about 30 seconds.
Well, this will be a celebration in memory of Fabrice Salençon, their teammate, who died of a heart attack just before the start of the Tour of Germany. For that reason, the team pulled out of competition. They've come back in for the Tour de France, and now they will remember him, because this rider here was thought to be the star of the future, along with Salençon, who died of a heart attack and had many post-mortems, and it was death by natural causes. A great tragedy, and I'm sure that Sylvain Chavanel will be thinking of that as he comes up the home straight here. He's going to take third place. He's got away from the big bunch. Nobody's chased him down. He looks over his shoulder. He's learning to be a good professional, making sure nobody is coming back. Look at the time gap, Paul. It is still quite big here.
Time gap is huge. It's still around about 3 minutes and 50 seconds back to the main field, so there is a new leader of the bike race this afternoon. As Chavanel gets the cheers of the French crowd, the main field cannot be very far back. 3:50, that's the time since Richard Virenque crossed the line right now, so he's the new leader of the bike race, he's the new king of the mountains, and of course the winner of the stage. This is Rogers.
Well, is this Michael Rogers from Australia? That is the ride of your life, the first man ever in the Tour de France, and that's a superb result for Rogers as he crosses the line there. Then comes the rest of the group as they're led in there. Stefano Garzelli, very, very close indeed, but Michael Rogers done an incredible ride there for Australia. And the gap has counted out on 4 minutes plus there. Now, yes, maybe Armstrong did allow it to go, and maybe Richard Virenque is tired, but a 4-minute gap is big, and it's going to take some pulling back. Look at that now, one finger to the sky. Richard Virenque has won his 6th stage of the Tour de France. Well, we will come back, of course, with all the calculations to hand. There is the champion of the day, and he's French. Richard Virenque has won the first Battle of the Alps. We'll take a short break, and then we'll come back and we'll learn exactly what really has happened in today's stage of the Tour de France.
And welcome back to the Tour de France and the coverage right here on OLN. Well, Stage 7 is now in the history books, and it ends with 2 new people in the jerseys. First of all, let's talk about Richard Virenque.
Great ride by Virenque, coming out of perdition and purgatory. It's been an up-and-down career for him since the '98 drug scandal with the Festina team. But today, he's really done a special ride, getting the yellow jersey, as well as a great stage win in Morzine. Unbelievable effort, not only by Virenque, but by his teammate, Paolo Bettini, one of the best all-around riders in professional cycling today, doing a huge tempo up to the last climb, and then Virenque using his climbing skills to maintain his advantage over a charging peloton all the way into Morzine. Great ride by the Frenchman. You got to give it to this guy. He never, ever gives up.
No, he doesn't, and he's been here before. This is familiar territory because he won this same stage in 2000.
Yes, absolutely. He won the stage here to Morzine in 2000 for the Pulte team after he had come back from the suspension for the Festina doping scandal. So incredible surprises from Richard Virenque. I couldn't believe it when he won the Ventoux stage last year, resisting huge acceleration by Lance Armstrong on that stage last year to the Ventoux. One of the best climbers of the world. He saves everything for the Tour de France. We don't see him anywhere throughout the year, but he seems to be able to come up with the goods here at the Tour year after year.
Now, we didn't see the US Postal boys chase, as you had mentioned before that you didn't think they would, but tomorrow, stage 8, a big stage. It finishes off with L'Alpe d'Huez.
Big stage tomorrow, great stage for the bike racers. A classic Tour stage over the Galibier. Before that, it would be the Telegraph, and then up to Alpe d'Huez, a great mountain climbing stage. The second day in the Alps, and I think we'll see some real fireworks and a lot of guys losing time. couple of big losers out on the road today. Gilberto Simoni losing big time. Santiago Botero also lost a lot of time. This is actually quite a long stage as well. Before they ever get to the mountains, they're going to do a lot of kilometers, 217 Ks at the end of the day when they get to Alpe d'Huez. So I think that'll have a lot of fatigue into the legs on the bike racers. They've been racing a lot already. Very hot stages so far, so a lot of fatigue out on the roads. Galibier is a monstrosity of a climb. Alpe d'Huez very hard as well. Great day of racing tomorrow.
All right, you did not predict Richard Virenque for the stage win today. How about a prediction for tomorrow?
Lance Armstrong is going to win tomorrow's stage of the Tour de France.
And you had mentioned earlier, too, they kind of have a love-hate relationship, Richard Virenque and Lance Armstrong.
He will not be pleased, Lance, that Richard Virenque. It's taken a little of his thunder.
A big stage tomorrow. Again, we are in the mountains, and it's all filled with action. Now, remember, tomorrow our coverage has changed a little bit right here on OLN. We will not be live at 9 a.m., but don't worry. Of course, we will be here for you during primetime coverage. That begins at 8 o'clock with Bob Roll and myself and the pre-race show. Of course, we'll have highlights from today's stage. Plus, we will preview once again that Stage 8, which finishes at Alpe d'Huez. Don't forget, you can also go to the web to cover all the action. Go to olntv.com. We are the official English language website for the tour. Easy to say for me.